Let's go ahead and get started. This is the El Paso County Public Health Board of Health meeting of January 26th, 2022. And this meeting is being live streamed on the El Paso County Public Health Facebook page. And let's start with the board member roll call. So, Doris?
Here.
Commissioner Tammy Bremer? Commissioner Lojinos Gonzalez?
Here.
Councilmember Dave Donaldson?
Here.
Kari Kilroy?
Here.
Dr. Richard Boo?
Here.
And Ed Collins is absent today. He gets an excused absence. He's got something important to do. Okay, not seeing any elected officials in the room. Our next item, approval of the agenda. So the agenda was published and sent out to all board members. And any changes or discussion about the agenda? Yes.
This is a question for me in the future, or if we could do it today. Is it possible to move public comment up towards the front of the meeting so that folks who want to, speak for their 2 or 3 minutes have to wait until the end? That's the way it's done, like at the D11 school board. That's the way it's done at city council.
Yeah.
I'd be interested, and we could adjust the agenda in the future, or even today. I understand the problem today would be some people might think we're not going to get to it till the end, so they may not be going to show up until the end. Just trying to be considerate of their time and not have them sit through the whole meeting if they don't want to.
Yeah, I think one of the things that happens with public comment is by listening to the discussion of board members, various presentations and all, I think they gain knowledge. And I think that sometimes the knowledge gained can also affect what they had intended to say. This is our routine. We've been doing it this way for a long, long time. That doesn't mean it's necessarily the best way to do it. We actually had this discussion the other day. And I think having it at the end makes it also sort of the final say, sort of the now that we've done our business, we get to hear from the public and they get to reflect back on the work that we've done. So I think they get to hear what we have to say, they learn from it, and that I would like to continue with the way that we've done it. We can take a vote on that. I'm not quite sure what a motion would look like. I've heard several options there, but my personal preference would be leave it where it is.
Then this is just friendly thought, but I would move that we move public comment up to, if this is seconded, we could discuss this. I would move that we move public comment up to even before the Board of Health comments. So item number 3 on a typical agenda.
So the very first item after we call the meeting to order is public comment.
Yes, sir. Or after recognitions, if you want to do the recognition. My motion will be to move. My motion would be to move it up to item number
3.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So Councilmember Donaldson has made a motion that we move public comment up to item number 3 instead of where it's been historically the item before we adjourn the meeting. Is there a second?
I'd like to make a comment or questions before someone leaves.
Same. I mean, I kind of have some, I think both have good points. I mean, I understand making people wait and wait and wait. But then you also have a good point about hearing the information and may even get their, if they had questions, they may even get those answered. So
Typically what we would do is if someone seconds it, then we can have discussion, then we vote on it. This is all friendly. And I think there's things to be talked about on both sides, but if no one even wants to second it, then we don't have to even discuss it.
Well, I think we don't second it. You're thinking that it's over. I think I want to discuss it before. Again, this is not an itemized item.
Right.
So we're asking for a vote 3 minutes into a new request. So I prefer to just discuss it first. So may I ask for a friendly halt to your motion, or what do you call it, a friendly removal of your motion until I get to discuss more?
Go ahead,
Is that
Commissioner.
okay?
Sure.
Okay, all right, so I have originally made the request for the Board of County Commissioners also to put things very valuable. And again, sometimes they don't know if they're going to speak at 5 minutes or at 3 hours in the conference. So that's really good. But based on how meetings have been kind of generally going in the last 2 years, I kind of don't mind that idea of at least having them listen to something. At the very least, they might want to listen to the comments we make before they comment, right? And so I'm a little bit, again, this 5 minutes into a request. Normally I would just say, yeah, put it to the front, because that's exactly what I made the request for, and we did. We changed it, the county commissioners to put it back up front, which is like city council. But there might be some benefit to having them listen to the discussions and having them talk at the end, because of the way discussions have happened. I might be interested in responding to comments we've made and others have made. So I just let other discussions, I just like to think about it a little bit more, maybe do this for next month. Sorry. Sam, would you?
And that would be fine with me if we want to just think it over, vote on it next month. A lot of citizens, they have jobs, and if they want to make, it's good for them to know I can do that. It's going to be about 8:45 when I can make my comment, versus they really don't know when that's going to occur. And the ones who want to comment, a lot of times, they know what they want to say. They want to bring an issue to our attention or speak in favor of something. They're not making it up as they listen to us in a meeting. But so that's the reason I brought it up.
And I'd like to just say that then we have to be prepared to be here for longer than 2 hours. And a lot of you have other commitments. If we have public comment in the beginning, like we had at the last meeting, we were there much longer than the 2 hours. So I think that a lot of times Dr. Vu has to go back to the clinic. You know, people have, the board here has jobs outside of this because this is voluntary work. So that's the disadvantage of in the front, unless you can get a commitment from everybody that you're going to mark this whole day off on their calendar in case there's a lot of comment. I don't know how else you would do that, or at least a good half of the day until noon or something. There's a way to work around that, but I disadvantage because sometimes people have to leave because our meetings are generally 8:30 to 10:30. And so because we have more people commenting, then we have to be prepared to stay so we can vote these items that require a vote. Otherwise, we might not have a quorum.
I think a compromise there might be to limit the public comment to 30 minutes at the front, or even less, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And then if there's additional, it'll be at the end. And that way we can.
That runs afoul of the open meeting laws, which is that if people come and make comment to the board, they all get to comment. We don't get to limit it to 30 minutes or a certain number of people get to comment. My understanding is that if you want to make a comment to the board, attend the meeting, sign up, and everybody who asks to comment, we have, or Lord, is that your understanding?
That's a First Amendment free speech issue, yes.
Okay.
That if someone wishes to make a comment, should be given forward an opportunity. That's why we try to how many people are coming so that we have time and resources for everyone to be able
Which
to
we've
speak
done.
and sometimes limit their time as well.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
And if I can, because Doris makes some good points, because unlike city council or county commissioners, where we're committed to that days with your board, maybe not so. However, in terms of the 2 hours, those people got to speak not at public comment, they got to speak on the issue. So it's not very likely that people would come and speak for 2 or 3 hours during public comment. It would be most likely after public comment has been, might have been 15, 20 minutes, and then they speak for 2 or 3 hours on an issue we are voting on that day. I don't think we've had people come out just because they wanted to voice their opinion on a certain subject that was not on an itemized subject, and that's when they're allowed to speak separately. So I, I see both sides. I don't think the issue would occur like the 2 or 3 hour discussion. Or, yeah, I wouldn't anticipate it, but she makes a good point about how outside a couple of us, this is
Yeah.
not our fault. This is not our job. Like, this is for us, right? This is part of our many jobs. that we have.
Chair wishes to comment, which is that having been here long enough, that members of the public may choose to comment on almost any topic. And we have been surprised sometimes. And so I think keeping it toward or at the end of the meeting, which is the way we've done it, and it seems to benefit from the process that we go through. It's also respectful of board members' time who have other jobs. And I'll just say as an addendum, I've learned stuff every meeting. Through the course of the meeting, I gain new information. I may or may not change an opinion about something, but the process of going through the meeting is personally helpful. And I think that's why we do it. That's why we do it in public, is to show and that people can gain from that discussion. So unless there's any other discussion, I'd like to see Councilmember Donaldson. And is there a second?
Are you continuing with the motion?
I went through it. I'd say let's proceed with the agenda as it is today, and then perhaps we can put this on the agenda for next week just to discuss it.
I'd like to think about it a little bit more.
Okay. So Board of Health member comments is item number 3. And let me mix up the routine here a little bit by making some of my own comments. First of all,
Did we get approval of the agenda?
I'm sorry, what? Approval of the agenda. Okay, let's go ahead and take a vote. Thanks.
That's why you have those tabs.
Thanks. Keep me organized. Okay, all in favor, go ahead and make a
We
motion.
already move to approve. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, let's move to item number 3, which is Board of Health comments. I'll make 3 quick comments. First of all, our COVID cases are down, and I'm sure that everyone here looks at the data and analytics page on the public health website, which, by the way, has sort of become a standard for our county and some others as well. Cases are down. We're trending down in a number of different areas. I think it's certainly too soon to say this is the end, but some of the language that we've talked about is that it may be the beginning of the transition. And by that, it may be that COVID will not be number one issue on most people's minds, that it may become more like an endemic disease like the annual flu. We're hoping that the technology will allow maybe for an annual update as opposed to these recurrent boosters and so on. So I wanted to mention that as a hopeful sign, and that for the health department, you know, we do a lot of things in the health department. We have a lot of different, we have a lot of departments, and the last 2 years have pretty much pulled all the air out of the room and devoted it to COVID, although your team has labored on with our other routine tasks. That was the first thing I'd like to say. So that's a hopeful note. The second thing is that you should have all received from the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment a required training for board members. And that was a result of a statute of law that was passed this past year. And I took it. I don't know who has also taken it and completed it, But I thought it was darn good. And some parts of it I'm particularly interested are the organization of public health in Colorado, the history of public health in Colorado I found particularly good, and then the responsibilities, the statutes, responsibilities, and authorities were, again, I learned something from it. So I thought it was beneficial. The second part of it, not to belabor it, was about emergency response. And, you know, I always think we're just on the cusp of some other possible public health emergency, and we need to do everything we can to get ready. So again, this was a crossover between public health and public safety, which you know I enjoy. And then very briefly, I just wanted to say thank you to the public health staff. You guys continue to knock it out of the ballpark, and so hardworking, and your dedication and real professionalism. And I know it's been really, really, really tough 2 years, but you've hung in there and you've done a wonderful job, and you've really helped support our county and the citizens of our county. So I just wanted to, you know, I won't be the first or last to say that, but I do want to say thank you to our public health staff and public health leadership for the excellent job that you've done. That's all I had to say. Let's start here. Williams, any comments?
Sure, a couple things. Appreciate Dave's comments on that. It's exactly what I requested the county do, so I'm going to take that serious consideration. I just preferred it would be next month, just because I want it on an itemized agenda. It makes more sense to do that, so I'm going to definitely take that as serious because it's something I've supported. Two, I did try to take the training.
Yeah.
It said I had to verify something, validate. I couldn't find the second email. It said you must validate yourself, so I couldn't get logged on. So I will try again.
Well, we can help with that. It's a training mechanism called Canvas, and it's used for a lot of other
Yeah, and I clicked on
continuing
it.
medical education. It's in that.
Did say they.
It's in that area. I bet we have some technical.
I'll try it again. I'll try it again.
Andrew, we can help.
If I can't log on a second
Okay.
time,
Sure.
I'll try again. But it said it had sent out a second email that I needed to confirm
Okay,
receipt of.
well, let's make it
Couldn't
easy.
find the email, the second one. And then did like the CDC report last week showed the efficacy and strength of both natural immunity as well as natural immunity plus a vaccine shot. And I thought was very, very valuable insight to both. And that's it.
Okay. Commissioner Bremer, any comments? No, let's start this side.
Well, again, I echo what you said, Dr. Turbush. I appreciate the public health staff so much and for all the work that they do, as well as our partners. I think our partner agencies are really important too, and I just want them to know how much we appreciate their partnership with the health department.
Okay.
No,
Curry,
no comment.
anything?
No, maybe make something up.
Make something up. Dr. Vu, right at ground zero for clinical medicine here in this community. What
Thank you.
can you tell us? What comments do you have?
Oh, well, I don't have any comments. No, I do. I have a comment. I think echo that COVID cases are coming down, but at this time, even though it's coming down, it's still high. So, thank you.
So be careful.
Yes, that's it.
Right, it's too soon to declare victory and go home.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, Councilman Member Donaldson.
I'd just like to say thank you to Deanne, who helped me out yesterday. I was going to do a presentation at a group, city council, and they wanted me to talk a little about the Board of Health, the public health. And so she provided me with some slides. Well, I don't know that it was you that sent the slides, but then you helped me out go through them and prepare some comments. So thank you.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Okay, number 4, which is one of the best parts of the Board of Health meeting, is recognizing our public health champions. So Deanne, I think you have some preamble to this.
Yes, and this morning I'm very pleased that we'll be recognizing Sgt Steve Brown. And Sergeant Brown, if you are here, would you join us?
There he is. Okay.
He will be a familiar face to many of you. but just have a couple of remarks that I wanted to share with the board regarding Sergeant Brown. Began working here at the Citizen Service Center in March of 2018. And in his role here, he oversees all of the security operations for the building. Sergeant Brown has more than 23 years of service with EPSO, including experience as a patrol sergeant, as well as specialized training and experience as a crisis negotiator. He's a dedicated public servant. He's been a tremendous asset to our team here at Public Health for helping us assess our security needs, ensuring an officer is always present in our lobby for our staff and clinical and client safety. He's also trained our staff on how to respond to critical incidents, providing support to our staff who were working with clients who may be upset, and working through some challenging situations as it related to rabies enforcement procedures we were taking, other items where we've really relied on him to help us understand safety concerns as well as negotiation skill that he's well experienced in as well. He has also helped us in planning and coordinating additional security for these very meetings, and we're very appreciative of all of that work. And he has gone out of his way repeatedly to assist us during the COVID response. And also notable, as our COVID response needs don't follow typical business operation hours, we always know that we can rely on Sergeant Brown, advise us and support us as needed. And we and our entire team greatly appreciate that. He has also provided expert assistance and support to our satellite locations. As you know, we have a location in Southeast Colorado Springs, as well as Fountain. Any concerns that we have regarding operations, he's always there to support those concerns as well. And after a rewarding career in law enforcement, he is retiring in the end of February. So we will be very sorry to see him go, and we want to recognize him for the true public health champion that he is. And I would be remiss if I didn't note that he does all of this always with incredible good humor, smile, and just ever optimism and willingness to support us. It's greatly appreciated. And the partnership between public health and public safety has been absolutely critical for us and to further the public health, the safety, and well-being of our community. So thank you, Sergeant Brown. In recognition of all those tremendous efforts, we have
A star.
You get a star.
You are a star.
For always being a star for us.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Any comments for us?
Would you like to make any comments?
Sure. I wasn't really prepared to make comments, but here we go. I just wanted to say thank you. When I first came here, or for the award, and when I first came here, you guys welcomed me with open arms and offered me an office up here. I was in a different location that wasn't very safe to be in. So as far as the logistics of where the office was. So it was nice to come up and work in an environment. And I've said this, I don't know how many times to you and Susan about how this team always works together, how they always collaborate. And I think about when COVID first took off and everybody was scrambling to try to get things figured out. And I got a phone call late Friday evening and came down to assist and saw a team that had given everything that they had. And they were absolutely on their last string as far as energy and the ability to focus, but they were still here and they were still working the mission. So I really appreciate it. It's an honor. Thank you.
Yeah, and then we'd like to get a picture with Sergeant Brown and the board as well.
Go to what? Where do we need to go?
Do it in the backdrop.
On this side over here? Okay.
Oh, the bigger one here,
Calisthenics.
the bigger one right here.
Let me know. Front and center.
Front and center, oh, I'm gonna take up a lot of space, just so you guys know.
You gotta go side me.
Yeah, we gotta
Focus on.
Right.
I am chicken. Yes.
Oh.
So you'll be done.
Standing.
All right.
Like she-
We'll take several. All right, 1, 2, 3. Okay, do you want to grab some?
Yeah, I got them.
Okay. I think that is good. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Okay.
everybody. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank
Enjoy
you.
retirement.
Thank you. Congratulations.
22 work days. Nobody's counting.
Stay safe.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Sure.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well done to pull this one out. Thank you.
Police officer.
Oh, really?
Thanks.
Yeah.
That's something about it.
I was gonna say, how will we know you were here? Yes, the minutes, yeah, and the photograph.
Make sure we sign it, Dave, Dr. Wu.
Oh, yeah, I didn't.
Sarah was didn't sign it.
It's approved. It is approved. Okay, well, next on our agenda is approval of minutes, and the minutes are in your meeting packet. I'm sure you've all had a chance to take a look. And questions, additions, deletions? No? Okay, let's go ahead then, and I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Mr. Chair, I would move approval of the Vicky and the team for keeping track of a complex and complicated and emotionally charged meeting and boiling it down very, very well. It deserves kudos for this extra long one.
They are good.
I'll second all of that.
Okay, let's see. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. New business. Now, we have two items that are going to require some explanation. The first one is approval of a lease renewal for the city of Fountain and Mount Carmel occupancy. So this is another example of our great partnerships. And in fact, they're both about partnerships. So our El Paso County Attorney Mary Ritchie, would you go ahead and explain this to us, and so we can vote on it?
Sure, thank you. Mary Ritchie, Assistant County Attorney. As you know, the board purchased the Public Health South building in 2020 to serve the southeast portion of the county. That's where military populations reside, and when there's been a dramatic increase in population growth. Public Health looked to further collaborate and share space with our partners in this area of the county. On September 22nd, 2021, not that long ago, the board unanimously approved a lease for the City of Fountain and Mount Carmel Veterans Service Center for occupancy at the Public Health South building. The City of Fountain has been using the leased premises since that time for the public purpose of an alternative location for operations of its Office of Emergency Management. It's for an administrative substation for the Fountain Police Department, and as the main station for its Behavioral Health Connect unit, modeled after the Sheriff's Office Behavioral Connect unit. Mount Carmel has used the leased premises since that time for the public purpose of providing and coordinating mental health services for veterans and related services. And they currently see clients 1/2 day per week at Public Health South. The LOC has also been an essential component in the COVID-19 response, with testing and vaccinations continuously offered at the site. One area of the building also houses our WIC office. County Attorney's Office and Finance Department have worked through the terms and rules that are presented for approval today. Recall, the original lease was about not for monetary profit, but to pay for ongoing operating costs. When the building was purchased, there was an agreement from the City of Fountain Fountain to resurface the parking lot and ADA compliant upgrades. And the public health director previously recognized the City of Fountain for its outstanding partnership with the station, with the public health director, the El Paso County Facilities Department, the IT Department, Finance and Budget Department. It was for monthly lease payments and operating costs as additional rent would remain the same for the term of this extension unless amended in accord with the public at a later date. The lease renewals extend the term for another year to the end of 2022. The lease renewals have also been agreed and approved by the City of Fountain and Mount Carmel, and Paso County Board of Health is the legal owner of the building. The board has the right to approve who continues occupancy. Therefore, the lease renewals are brought before the board for approval. Upgrades being performed for safety and professionalism at the building, and we are in our COVID-19 response. A formal ribbon cutting ceremony has been delayed. All board members and the City of Fountain will be invited for another walkthrough once.
And my takeaway from that is that the terms continue and the period is for 1 year.
For an additional year.
Happened to be there when it was opened. And I would say that it's one of the very best that has come out of this horrible pandemic is our office. And I think to be able to extend services down to one of the most rapidly growing parts of our county has really served us well. Any other questions? Okay, well, yes, please.
I just have a small question, and Mary, could you be involved here also? Would it make more sense, it may or may not, to rather than having a 1 year and a longer term renewal or an automatic renewal for
For purposes of this year, we did it according to the lease. If there was an amendment to the lease, we could add an automatic renewal portion.
Can I get your opinion? Would that make more sense?
I haven't considered, that's up to the board really, whether or not they want it to continue to automatically renew. I don't have any particular, probably a good idea just because of considering the costs to probably address it every year, because it doesn't change throughout the year unless there's need be. And it was I guess surprising, not surprising to no change for next year, but because it was so recent, that may be why. So I would say it's up to the board, but those are your considerations.
This sounds like a small preference or recommendation for automatic renewal as long as there's a termination notice.
Written right now, it would have to be amended,
Right.
and that's.
That way we don't have to just negotiate it year after year, every year. So I would, is it okay if I put a motion on the table to have a yearly automatic renewal? And I before that, I apologize. I don't remember what the termination notice was. Was it 90 days?
It automatic, well, it auto terminates at the end of the year.
Okay, so
Unless it's renewed
right.
for now. And there are other termination, voluntary termination terms, and I just don't know what those are. But
Right.
for purposes of renewal, it has to be renewed every year the way it sits now. It does not have
I'm assuming there's termination notice language in the lease that allows for X number of days, 90 days.
Yes, sir. Or just for no reason, actually, just if the parties wish to terminate, they can terminate with a certain amount of notice.
Thank you. Therefore, I'd like to move to amend to have an automatic renewal language in order to decrease the burden of renegotiation.
And that would just be subject to agreement by the lessee, the tenant.
Let me ask you a quick question, and just by way of explanation, how many of us have been down there to the fountain site and gotten I know you and I have. Yeah, and there's a formal ribbon, you've certainly been there, and yeah, okay. There's a formal ribbon cutting coming up soon.
And it's been delayed. Maybe Dan can speak to that.
As the pandemic allows and as the renovations allow, we hope to have a formal ribbon cutting for the facility. We have not been able to do so yet.
Okay, well, this is not an academic discussion. I remember signing the original lease, which went on to how many, I don't know how many, more than 30, I think, pages. It was a typical real estate lease. And to be there for the opening, and it was a momentous and positive experience. I think that's fine. I would vote in favor of that, but I would also encourage members of the board to go down there and see that. And when the ribbon cutting comes up, to participate in that. I think it's one of the very best things, like I said, that's come out of the pandemic. And it really goes along with our partnering missions. Any other discussion? Dr. Bill? Yes, please.
So I would say I concur in the how great of a decision it was, I think, by this board and public health really department to move forward with the building. I thought it was outstanding use of CARES Act dollars, which is what I believe funded that. And we made smart decisions that we're now seeing, a year and a half later, fruition in terms of other uses and support to other entities. My one question would be, does our adding or making them force it to go back to like City of Fountain to re-vote on anything, or only at the end of next year? Because if they voted on it and we make a change here, now they got to go back and vote on it again potentially. I don't want to add a burden to their.
We can always propose an amendment, and that would be what it is that the board as the landlord is proposing an automatic renewal term rather than an automatic termination, but renewal. So that would be the proposal, and then we would bring it to the tenants, and if they, whatever process they need to do to approve it, they would do. And I have no idea whether or not they would be for it or against it, but I don't have any strong sense that they would be opposed.
And then we would revisit it in the February Board of Health meeting.
Then yes, you can do that. But at this point, I would recommend that you approve the renewal as it sits and propose that it be amended with a automatic renewal at a later date.
That's kind of where I'm getting.
That would kind of jump in. Okay, do you want to modify your motion?
I modify my motion as Mary had mentioned. To make a comment, it will be the automatic renewal will be to the benefit of the tenant. For example, right now the lease, the occupation of the premise is without a lease because the lease has already terminated, and this amendment already has retroactive date on it. So it is to the benefit of the tenant to have automatic renewal within termination notice.
Okay, any other discussion, questions?
I'll just say, I agree that eventually we want to get to an automatic renewal. I've heard that there are still many renovations going. There are still many other partner agencies that are potentially interested in coming in and having lease agreements. And I think that we will also see changes in those operational costs of quite literally keeping the lights on over this year. And so I think it makes a lot of sense to stick with what we've got for this year and actually do a true reevaluation. But perhaps a bit early in the year and have it on our December agenda so that there is not lapse, and then incorporate the opportunity to do the continuing renewal.
Okay, yes.
Mr. President, I think I support Commissioner Bremer just said that I think I would prefer to vote on what we have before us today, approve that, and then at some point, maybe have a presentation on the pros and cons of going to contract and then vote on it earlier in December of 22, so that we don't have a situation where we're into the next year.
Okay. That sounds helpful. Does Dr. Vu need to restate, or do we all understand what's on the table? We're going to vote to approve the lease as is, but make efforts during this next year to do a kind of a comprehensive review of all the aspects, the uses, the operational costs, et cetera, of the fountain facility, and then bring it up perhaps November, December of 22. Did I state that correctly?
Correct, thank you.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody against? Okay, now there's another part to this, and we actually have a guest here to do it. So Mary, could you take this one again?
Oh, actually, Deanne's gonna.
Oh,
I'll
Deanne,
take
okay,
this one.
Deanne.
Thank you.
That's here, okay, good.
So also looking at our Fountain South facility, as we mentioned, we've been looking at renovations for that facility. And in the course of the renovations, a question arose about the potential of using the facility as a Red Cross shelter for the community. So working closely with PPROEM, the Regional Office of Emergency Management, as well as Red Cross, we completed it to evaluate, and a facility use agreement was drafted to look at utilizing this as a community shelter. That has been reviewed by El Paso County Attorney Mary Ritchie, and we are also joined today by Pat Chappelle from the Red Cross, who will explain why having this building as an option for the community is important and what it means for resilience for the community. And Ms. Chappelle, if you would come up and join us.
Okay, did not know this was a speaking engagement.
We're
I
always
was looking at the validity of this.
No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure, right? Am I tall enough to see over this? Well, obviously, let me just share a couple of things with you. This is kind of hot off the press. As you know, the Red Cross normally is in business to respond to emergencies. And we're like, it's an acute response, so to speak. But what we found out in the last 4 to 5 years, we have gone from basically an acute response to chronic. And what's happening is we are well aware of the social vulnerability areas of the populace in terms of those are the ones, that are the most. We are also aware that we need to be able to shift so we can have a continued response, because basically being in a chronic response versus acute, that takes a lot of manpower, and we're 95%, volunteers. So we're trying to push and strategize how we will now better meet the needs of our communities. So think of 3 H's: hunger, health, and housing. And we're really trying to emphasize how we can engage, and I might want to talk to you a little bit after that, Dr. Bruce, of how we can engage the counties, the cities, the state in terms of how we meet the housing needs, because we need to be able to get people out of shelters. I mean, that's an emergency response, but they have a lot of other needs. And how can we find them sustainable housing as rapidly as we can? So obviously, having a shelter is critical for the safety and welfare of those affected by disasters. If we have facility agreements such as up and running ahead of time, we have a much better ability to open those shelters and getting our clients in a safe mode. My only comment regarding the shelter, a couple of comments actually, I see it's kind of a multi-use, and in terms of the other organizations will be in there. Do we know whether or not if we have to do a shelter, would those organizations still be in that facility? That's just a question, and that has to do with confidentiality and privacy of the clients. The other thing, have we addressed the access and functional needs component of sheltering? Because also we have to be able to meet those needs as well. So I wasn't sure about how that was addressed in this. The actual document is fine. But these are other areas I think we at some time need to talk about a little bit. Any questions?
Questions for Pat? Comments? We've known each other how long? It's been quite a few. Yeah.
Wow.
More than either one of us want to admit. You have actually been one of the most solid supporters of this community, our citizens, and public health. And we just love to partner with you. And thank you so much for all you do. I think your Red Cross personnel are real unsung heroes, and I hope you pass along to them big thank you from the Board of Health and from the Health Department for all they do. And I think it's absolutely in keeping with this theme that Deanne mentioned about public safety and public health teamed up together. So,
But again, at some point in time, we need to be able to have some discussions on those other areas about how we support you, the county, in terms of housing as well as health, like reserve corps, those kinds of things, and housing.
well, let me we'll call an audible here and say in February, we're hoping that Jim Reed from PPROEM will come in and present. If you have time, would you come to that meeting as well? I think it absolutely involves Red Cross. And as part of the bigger picture that we look for to support our citizens in disaster. And you play a really key role in that.
Because it's really a whole community approach, you know, that's where the Red
Yep,
Cross
yeah.
is supporting the whole community, whole of government, whole of society, yeah.
Any other comments? Yes.
And I would just add that our emergency preparedness and response team, led by Lisa Powell, we would be happy to work with you on the considerations for operations
Yeah.
and the needs and balance with tenants, as well as our own teams that are there.
Just let me know.
Happy to have those conversations.
Okay, I think after those two presentations, we are ready for a vote. So I think we could consider them together unless there's any objection. So what we are voting on is the approval of the lease renewal for the City of Fountain and Mount Carmel occupancy at Public Health South and approval of the Red Cross facility use
Did we vote on
agreement.
the first one? We voted on the first one.
We did, okay. Approval of Red Cross facility use agreement at Public Health South. Do we have a motion to approve that?
I moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Can I ask a question? Can I?
Yes, sure,
sorry.
sure,
I have
go
one
ahead.
question for
Please.
Mary. So I have one question and one small comment and one slightly
Sure.
moderate comment, and really for Mary. Mary, is this lease with Red Cross, is it from a template or was it?
Yes, it is, it's a common template, it means student council's approval as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I went through all
Based
that.
on other lease. So one small comment is, would it be reasonable to have a rent rate that is agreed upon upfront rather than a blank and then just fill in the blank later?
What area are you talking about, sir?
Section 9.
When it's used as a shelter, there's no fee.
There's no fee normally.
And then if it's used for other purposes, then there would be an agreed upon fee.
So the question is that agreed upon fee, should we agree upon it now? Or do we just leave it blank and?
It's no
There shouldn't be
fee.
any cost, normally the organization or the.
The only reason this would be used would be in a natural disaster.
Right.
A disaster declaration.
Right. And when it's used as a disaster, how much will Red Cross, how much will tenants pay the landlord?
I guess what I'm saying, when it's used in a disaster component, that whoever owns that facility, they do not charge the Red Cross for that space per se. We are liable if we do any damage to it or anything. That's when we have our facility checklist and things of that nature. We go with the owner of the facility and we go down that list, and then we go again with them after the end. And if there's any damage that we caused, then we're liable for that from $100 million. Oh,
That's on page 2 of the agreement under condition of facility.
So section 9B, can you explain section 9B, please, Mary?
9D,
9B, 9 boy.
okay.
well, that, we don't do that. I didn't guess that. That's very good.
I would I thought it was an alternative, and I thought it was just gonna be used for sheltering because it says in there. We can strike that, that second paragraph if, if we
Yeah,
need to come back for a fee.
good catch.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I don't want any confusion on this. They will not be like the other tenants that we have
Right.
asking for space. This is, as far as I know, we've done this only 3 or 4 times since I've moved back, Black Forest, Waldo. We had 2 fires in Hanover area, the 117 fire and the Fort Carson, Hanover. Those are the situations where I think this happens. It's not a recurring thing. Well, hopefully it is not hopefully it's not an annual thing,
I
but
don't exercise.
I know of 4 large times we've used this and.
I guess they, in this particular paragraph 9A and B, I guess one chooses one or the other. I guess that was the intent, how that was written.
It looks like it.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a good catch. Good catch, Dr. Vu. So the motion with the amendment to strike the statement 9B, which includes the option to pay per day, per week, and so on. So with that, it's been moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
I do have a second. I think Dr. Vu has a further discussion.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. So my third point is moot now that I understand the intention of the lease. Thank you.
Okay.
So, yes,
Yeah, Councilmember Donaldson.
Yeah, Mr. President, does this portion of the building just sit empty otherwise? So that it's prepared, I mean, it's just empty in case there's an emergency, we need to move into that part?
No, this room that we're considering,
Is it just one?
it's a large area that is currently where we have had our vaccination operations to provide vaccinations to the community. Also, as we move back into larger public conferences, meetings, it's also part of the facility that will be able to host community meetings. So this room is a multi-use room, but in the event of an emergency room, that large room would be prioritized to serve as the shelter.
It's multi-purpose. Plus, we've utilized the parking lot, right? We've used for automobile drive up and do testing and vaccinations and so on. So it's a great facility. I think it has many opportunities for future use that we haven't even explored yet.
Yeah. Because paragraph 1 tells the specific uses that we would have for the show, so used by the Red Cross. A center, storage for supplies, parking of vehicles, disaster shelter. So there's several components that this is addressing.
As an aside, it's also been considered to have independent power generation, with generator outside to, and that would be shared with Fort Carson.
Well, actually, the generator is
Is
part
it
of
there?
what led us down this road to realize the potential for a shelter, because as we were setting up
Okay.
the generator for the building, the question came up of what portions would be prioritized for the generator use, and if we wanted to serve as a shelter, the configuration of that would be impacted. So that generator conversation really led to further conversations leading to this.
I assume some disaster supplies would also be located on site? Yeah.
I have another question though, and I kind of addressed it earlier. With the other organizations that go and lease in that building, is there any provision that they recognize that we would be able to expand if we needed to? Sometimes if you have a shelter, you may have some other components that are supporting that shelter in the same general location.
So I think those are operational conversations that we could have as we move forward. Some of the functionalities housed in that building include operations of emergency management. So in the event of a disaster, I think they would be right there with us and supporting that response. And actually, I see we have Lisa Powell, who is our emergency preparedness and response manager, who would like to add to this conversation as well.
Hi, Lisa.
Yeah, hi, thank you so much. I just wanted to also note that when we have emergencies like the ones that you've mentioned, fires like Waldo and Black Forest and et cetera, generally what happens is that we work in conjunction with the Pikes Peak Region Office of Emergency Management and Red Cross to have conversations about what facilities might work best in an emergency for a shelter. And so just the approval of this facility to be used as a shelter doesn't necessarily mean that we would use it during an emergency. We sit and have those conversations about what makes the best sense. And part of the agreement is that, you know, if it's going to impede business for the health department, or if there's another reason why it doesn't make sense to use it at that time for a shelter, we're not obligated to absolutely use it for a shelter at that point in time. So I just wanted to kind of say that what we're trying to do right now is what has happened is that we've looked at the space with Red Cross, and they've agreed that the way that the facility looks could be used as a shelter, not that we have to use it. Thank you.
Okay. Are we good?
We're good.
Okay, any other comments? Yes. Commissioner Bremer.
Thank you. And to Lisa's point, she summed it up very well, but you know, that is the difference, I think, in a facility use agreement and a lease agreement. What we're doing today is laying the groundwork for the potential. And I'm very impressed that that public health staff was so forward-looking and anticipating the needs, the broader needs outside really normally your scope, and making sure that the room and the space could be configured for other potential uses down the road. I think that's incredibly forward-looking and strategic. And this is a facility use agreement, and hopefully it will not ever have to be used, but I'm glad that the county can be there if that part of the community needs it.
Understand it. Any other discussion points? Okay, I think we're back to the motion.
And there was a second.
And there was a second. Okay, all in favor of approval of this lease?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, well, let's move on to the next item, which is number 7, Director's Report. Ian, welcome.
Thank you. Appreciate being able to provide the director's report for you this morning. Our first item on the report is some follow-up from our most recent Board of Health meeting, where we spent some time discussing our email procedures for the Board of Health email, and we wanted to provide a status update related to that for the board to consider today. So our public health staff have reviewed feedback from the discussion at the last meeting. We've updated our procedures accordingly, and there are still a few outstanding items that we would just like to provide a status update for you today. And as background as well, we have worked very closely with County Attorney's Office, Mary Ritchie, as well as our partners in information technology for the county to implement these procedures. We also have available today Ben Crum and Thomas Flaherty with EPC IT. They're available on Teams as well. So if there's any questions from the IT perspective, we have their expertise available to assist us today as well. But starting out, just wanted to refresh that all of the procedures that are currently in place. So when we receive an email to our Board of Health email, that is automatically forwarded to all members of the board. That process should be receiving those emails currently. Senders, when they send an email to that inbox, they will receive an automatic reply so that they know it has been received and that it has been sent on to our Board of Healthers. And also in that auto reply, and you can see the language that we use on the screen right now, we also let them know where they can find information regarding the Board of Health meetings. So if they're inquiring about logistics of our meetings, the automatic reply provides them with that point of reference as well. If the inquiry includes information that it falls under administrative functions of the department and are appropriate for us to reply to as staff, so that would include any questions about meeting logistics, agency operations, or data questions, as those are functions of the administration of department, we will respond to those to help support getting information to the parties inquiring. But board members will be in blind copy on any responses that we send. So you will have full situational awareness regarding responses that we are sending to those inquiries. And the response will include language that clarifies that response is being supplied by our staff and our team and not the board itself to help clarify what message they may be receiving in return. You've seen in this director's report this month a chart showing the number of emails received and the topic, and it is our intent to continue that moving forward. Next slide, please. And then there were 2 additional areas of feedback that we have not yet addressed. And one of those, and part of the complexity of putting this process in place, is that as we are comprised of board members that are volunteers as well as county board members, we don't have a singular IT email infrastructure to set this up in. So board members are using personal email addresses when they receive these inquiries. We do have an option that county IT can create, well as Office 365 accounts for our board members, if that is the direction of the board. And that would allow all of these functions to be contained within the county IT infrastructure. We also addressed previously archives of the emails that we receive to this address. Those are being archived. We do not delete those emails. They are archived. We discussed setting up an archive for board members to be able to access that via Google Drives. However, in consultation with our partners in IT, it was advised that because our county IT infrastructure does not support Google Drives, that would not be a recommended pathway to archive those emails. So what we have available to us is Office 365 product that the county does support, where those email archives can be kept and can be accessed. And that was under the consultation of the El Paso County IT department. So that's where our processes currently stand, and would welcome further concern or direction from the board regarding this item.
Okay. To try and summarize, my understanding is that all emails from the public addressed to the Board of Health at elpaso.com go to all the board members all of the time, and that they are forwarded automatically.
Yes.
Okay. And there's an automated reply
Yes.
that comes from the health department acknowledging the receipt, and that if individual board members choose to reply, they do so, but should indicate that it's their reply, not necessarily the sense of the board. The other thing that I think I understand here is that for IT to set up a searchable database, now all these emails are archived, there's none lost, nothing's deleted, it's still there. But to set up a searchable database where board members can go in and look around and search based on, name or whatever, is not technically feasible right now. And that this is going to be something that is looked at. One of the options is to create an El Paso County email address, a separate email address for each and every one of us. I've done that. I've had one in the past. I can tell you my personal preference on that later. But is that roughly the understanding? We've collated all board member comments on the email policy, right? We have that.
Yes.
Is that in a separate slide or not on this slide?
So we have, we summarized those comments into the categories that we've addressed on these slides. So the email, the forwarding, the replies, standard language, those were some of the feedback areas from the previous meeting. So summarizing those into the procedural steps we've taken to this point, and then moving forward, one of the areas that we discussed at the previous meeting that is not yet implemented was that searchable archive that was originally intended to be a Google process and format, which has been advised instead to put into OneDrive so that IT can support that backup, that process. The access to that could then either be facilitated through our administrative team or to be facilitated via assigning those county emails, which once somebody is set up in the county email system, that gives them the access to OneDrive as well, so they could log into that OneDrive. So that is a component of the feedback received that has not yet been addressed.
Okay, let's go back one slide, please. Okay, so, but that's behind the firewall. What we're talking about is a searchable database on the Google Drive is behind the county firewall.
So we would not be utilizing the Google Drive at this point. IT is advising Office 365. And we do have some of our IT partners available if you'd like to hear more about the technical components of that access.
Okay. Well, this is kind of like weeds in spring. It keeps coming back. I think that the good suggestions that have been made from the beginning is that all board members get all the emails all of the time is a good one. That's been established. That's where we're at right now. We still have some technical challenges to overcome. And I think there's going to be some decisions about whether board members to have a county email. A number of us, myself included, are still working off of a personal email. Do you have an idea about how much staff time has been, just to give us a gross overview of how much time your staff has been working on this Board of Health email policy?
I would estimate that including our administrative staff, working with our IT and legal partners, all combined, it's 90 to 100 hours that have been spent collating the previous, archiving the previous emails, looking at processes and procedures to move this forward, and discussing this process to put it in.
Okay, well, just as kind of a summary comment, I think it's a pretty good system. It seems to work. There seems to be some additional kinks we can work out. Let's open up for board member comments and yes, please.
For Dan, do you have a rough idea of prior to COVID, how many emails we have compared to current COVID?
We have certainly seen a sharp increase in emails to that address. Prior to COVID, we would get a handful of emails to that inbox, most of them related to inquiries about meeting logistics. Certainly, given the profile of COVID and his interest in that has increased, that has sharply increased our volume.
I think it's a good idea, though, the searchable, eventually when we get to that point, for future board members have maybe just give them a little more history, an idea of what has occurred beforehand, what topics have come up. I would certainly support that.
Okay. Other comments, questions? Yes, please.
Deanne, when we say that the emails automatically go to all the board members, is that truly just automated, or does someone have to say, okay, I checked it out and I'll send it on to the board members?
It's truly an automated process. We have set that to auto forward. So as it's received, it automatically forwards, as it's been a process set up with our IT partners. So it does not rely on the manual forwarding from one of our team members.
Thanks. And then as far as a searchable database, it's probably something I'll never use. Just don't have time to go searching back into emails. I'm just trying to keep up with them as they come in. But that may be useful for others. And it might be useful if, say, there was a Cora request for, hey, we want to see all the emails on that you received about whatever. then you have this way of doing it, but that's not something I will use. The report you mentioned, like a chart showing the number of emails received and topic, that's the future, right? We don't have that this month, do we?
It's on page 9.
Okay, somehow I missed it, so I'll take a look at that. And then the only other thing I would add is when we do get an email to this Board of Health email address and you want to reply to it, you actually have to, if you just hit reply and type your reply, you will be replying to the Board of Health. You won't be replying to that individual. And it's the same way on City Council. If we get like all council when you reply, then you're replying to everyone, which you shouldn't do. So just be careful. You actually have to delete out Board of Health, put the person's email in there. I don't see any way of getting around that. I don't think there really is. You just have it.
No, I think that's a really good point, and it does run afoul of our open meetings law, and it's, exactly as you said, you just have to copy the name of the send and start a new email and tell them what you want to tell them.
And now since ours is totally automated, I guess there's no one in between who can stop that if it happens. Like City Council, I did the same thing the other day on City Council and one of our staff caught it. And he goes, hey, he just reminded me it was an accident. I knew what I was doing. So there's human in between who can stop it. But it sounds like with Board of Health, it's going to go. So no big deal, just warning.
Yeah, sure. Any other comments? This is not for action today. It's an update and more to follow. Yes, other comments, please.
Just a quick one. I greatly appreciate that 90 to 100 hours of staff work that has gone into ultimately providing more transparency. I think, the spirit of Mr. Donaldson's, Councilmember Donaldson's bringing this up was actually about being very open and transparent to the public. I think we've made huge strides, and this has laid great groundwork for hopefully starting to rebuild public trust with what is going on here. I think that we all felt like we were being very open, and it just takes a little logistical thing like this to give the appearance of not. So I'm very proud of the great strides and the fact that you all were willing to once again pivot and quickly act on something that I think we're doing a much better job of now. So thank you.
Mr. President, now that I've actually seen this little graph here, my suggestion would be that we have actual numbers of emails and not percentages, because 25% could be 100 emails or 3. So that would be helpful for me, or both.
For tracking subject or topic. We're tracking topic. Okay.
It is in narrative
It's in
form.
it's in the text. I was gonna
Page
say.
9 of 10.
It's in the text. And there's,
You can see it.
Okay, well, it sounds like you and your team, Deanne, have done a pretty good job of collating all the board members' comments and suggestions. And we'll look forward to maybe it again in February. And now, while we're here, since they came, are there any IT questions? We have IT experts in the room who can talk digits. Or, no?
no IT.
No one wants to step into that water?
Well, I just would like to say I support from IT. They have worked very closely with us to set that up and to be available this morning. So
That's been my experience too with county IT. Okay, I think we can move on to the next topic, please.
wonderful. So then we will move into our typical updates as they relate to Omicron and our public health response. As usual, we will kick that off with a data update from Fadi Okana and our public health data analytics team, as well as hearing from our medical director, Dr. Chris Irby.
I just wanted to, before we get going, thank you for the comments at the very top of the meeting. Likewise, we'd like to thank all the board health members. You're all here on volunteer time for your commitment, your insight, and your leadership throughout this whole thing. Just wanted to say that before we get going. Dr. Urbina and I are here this morning to present some high-level data regarding where we are right now and hopefully answer any questions that may come up. On your screen right now, you're seeing two graphs. The graph on the left, CDPHE, and the graph on the right comes from CDC that shows regional data. They're both displaying data on the genomic sequencing of a subsample of cases. And what's showing right now is that Omicron is responsible for a majority of the cases. In fact, for the last 3 weeks, CDPHE lags a little bit behind CDC data, but they're both in January. The last 3 weeks have been pretty much close to 95 to 100% share for Omicron. This is important for us to keep track of because less of the variants. This is a subsample. It does not represent all cases, but it is an important piece of information. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Fadi. Always a great presentation to follow you in the day. It's always very accurate and timely. I just wanted to, for the board members, just to make sure that they're updated on what's happening with the Omicron variant. I'm also glad to be here and thankful for your leadership and participation. As Fadi alluded to, it is now the dominant strain in the nation and the state, and it's now also true in El Paso County. Basically, of the subset that Fadi alluded to, 100% of the samples sequence came back positive as the Omicron variant, as he alluded to earlier. And I know there will be questions about this, so I'll just kind of cover it on a high level, but be very open to any questions regarding Omicron. It appears to be causing milder illness. And because it is clearly affecting the upper respiratory tract of many of our ill folks in El Paso County and around the state and the country. But it also depends on the factors of the host. So their vaccination and booster status, their confirmed previous infection, their age, and overall health and comorbidities also impact on the severity of the illness. And finally, it's important to point out, and we'll talk about a little bit more about infection-related immunity as well as vaccine-related immunity that Commissioner Gonzalez talked about a little bit later in this presentation, but that the same prevention strategies against original and current variants continue to be recommended against the Omicron. So I'm going to stop there, and if there are no questions, Fadi, continue with your data.
You have a question for Dr. Urbina now?
I
Please.
do.
Dr. Urbina, let's jump in here quickly, and then you can continue with your question. Please go ahead.
Thank you. You said here that the same prevention measures are working. How about some of the same treatments? I've heard that monoclonal antibody treatment is not as effective against this variant.
Great question. We weren't able to put everything on this slide, but that's a good question. Glad you asked it. It is true. And it has to do with the structure of the variant itself. And so now this variant is now able to evade the immune protection, not only of the vaccine, previous infection, as well as the monoclonal antibodies. So now 2 of the 3 monoclonal antibody treatments are no longer effective and no longer used. So we only have now 1 monoclonal antibody treatment that's effective, and it's unfortunately in very short supply.
Thank you.
Dr. Urbina, can I have a quick question for you?
Of course.
So 2 out of 3 monoclonal antibodies are no longer effective. Can I clarify that, Dr. Urbina? Is it that they are ineffective, or is it that they are predicted to have markedly reduced effectiveness?
Great question. And I think it has to do with the quantity of effectiveness. So I think the FDA is no longer recommending them because of its lower and reduced effectiveness. It has some effectiveness, but not enough for the FDA to continue to recommend it under emergency use authorization.
Thank you, Dr. Urbina. So they are markedly predicted to have markedly reduced effectiveness. There's not enough supply of the sotrovimab, the GSK monoclonal antibody that is still predicted to be still effective. What is the strategy for treatment at this time if the other 2 are less effective. And currently, are we still in Colorado? Are we still giving the Eli Lilly and what's it, Pfizer? The other two?
Pfizer now, the only one that's now effective. Yes, that is correct.
It's effective, right?
The companies are still developing new monoclonal antibody treatments, so those are now in clinical trials. So hopefully we'll have new information as it continues to evolve the science associated with COVID-19. Right now, that they mentioned the monoclonal antibody treatment that no one can pronounce from Pfizer is currently the only one that's available in the United States, and that's in short supply across the country. So that is one of the treatments that are currently used in the treatment of COVID. But now with the new two antivirals, and I don't have those right in front of me. We don't have a slide of those, but those are currently FDA emergency use authorization approval, and they're available, although also in shorter supply, available for physicians out in the community who want to prescribe them. It's the standard process of if it's available in your local pharmacy or in your healthcare setting, those can be prescribed by health providers to prescribing them very early on in the development of COVID-19, similar to monoclonal antibody treatment, but it actually focuses on the replication of the virus itself and inhibiting that virus, similar to Tamiflu when we use it in influenza, similar to that. Also, they're now allowing remdesivir, which is an antiviral, as an outpatient. So those are three treatments that are currently available. Obviously, Dr. Vu, my vote would always be to prevent it from happening, and that's why we included the same prevention strategies on this slide. But those are always good questions, more available, and we're certainly available to talk offline about specific treatments that are currently FDA approved.
Thank you. I'm sorry I'm taking up so much time. And this is a question I don't know. I don't know the answer. If you can help me, maybe you or Fabi or someone else. Monopiravir and Paxlovid, the two oral antiviral medications. Of course, Paxlovid is shown to be more effective compared to Monopiravir. But how do we prescribe it? That's a question I don't know. I don't know the answer.
So we'll get back to you on that. Currently, it is FDA EUA approved. There are clinical guidelines available through the NIH. So why don't we follow up after this meeting, and I'll try to send out, and also try to figure out if the state has put out recommendations through their Health Alert Network. So we'll follow it up with that after this meeting, Dr. Vu.
Yes, I apologize. I must not be clear. How carry them? Who has them?
Sure. Certainly some pharmacies have them, but again, it's in limited supply. I can't tell you currently which pharmacies do, but I will also follow up the answer to that question as well.
Thank you.
Okay. I think there are a number of other questions, but maybe we should let Dr. Urbina finish his prepared remarks, and then we'll jump back into questions. Is that acceptable? Okay. We kind of jumped right in the middle of your presentation, Dr. Urbina.
No,
is there anything that you wanted to? I know you were going to cover several other topics.
No, I'd like to turn it back to Fadi. I think that we're open. You know, we're here to help you understand this, convey information. So we're open to questions at any time.
Okay, let's do a Q&A then. If you're questions from board members.
It may be covered in a slide, so maybe I'll turn it back over to Fadi, and then we'll walk it through, then turn it back to the questions, if that's okay.
Okay, Fadi, and then Q&A, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Just wanted to give you a put into where we are right now in terms of incidents. Dr. Turbush, you mentioned a decreasing pattern at the top of the meeting. That's what we're seeing too. It looks like we peaked on January 15th in terms of incidents, and since then we are heading in the right direction. I do want to mention though that we are decreasing, but we went up so high that even though we are decreasing, we're still seeing 1,300 cases a day on our 7-day average based on data from as of yesterday. So we are still seeing a very high number of cases. 1,300 cases per day, just to put it into context, compares to about 230 cases a day when we last met in December. Again, Omicron comes in and it changes the equation there, but just wanted to give you context in terms of the volume of cases. Another caveat that I have to bring up is that every time we see an explosion in cases, the unfortunate side effect has to deal with the data quality. We tend to see data lags in testing data, in incidence data, in hospitalizations, and in deaths as well. Next slide, please. We wanted to give you a little bit of a summary comparing at the very top of the table. We're comparing monthly data. You see that January has had a lot more cases than October, November, and December. We're also looking at admissions per day, and January is recording more admissions per day than the previous 3 months. However, the deaths per day is almost half of that of October, November, and December. We've had 50 deaths so far in January compared to the previous 3 months. But again, reiterating the caveat that was just mentioned, January is A, not complete yet, and B, the data may be lagging. However, so far, it looks like the deaths are less than the October, November, December. This is our first meeting in 2022, so wanted to give you a little wrap up in 21 and how it compared to 2020. We saw more cases in 2021, but the huge bias there is that early in March through all the way till July in 2020, we did not have the testing that is available now. So there were a large number of undetected cases. So the case comparison there between 2020 and 2021 has to address that bias. In terms of admissions per day, we admitted 5 more people per day in 2021 than 2020. However, the deaths per day remained, within the statistical noise, remained largely the same. That's a testament to the vaccine working, to the improvement in therapeutics, to the improvement of treatment, and to the improvement in the hospital treating the patients in 2021 compared to 2020. We also know a lot more about the virus in 2021. Next slide, please. This graph in front of you now is showcasing the vaccine status based on the age decade. So the blue bars on the screen represent 1 dose, the red bars represent fully vaccinated, and the green bars represent boosters. We are seeing a consistent volume of folks getting their booster. The 60 and above age group are all around that 50% boosted, and about 75% or higher fully vaccinated. The younger decades are behind that, but we are seeing a consistent volume of boosting. We haven't seen a spike. We're seeing a consistent volume of daily folks getting their booster. Next slide, please.
I think this will answer some of the questions that I anticipate that will be asked, and I think Commissioner Gonzalez alluded to this earlier. We looked at the literature after our last Board of Health meeting and wanted to kind of update folks on infection-induced immunity as well as vaccine-related immunity, because I think last Board of Health meeting there was lots of questions. These is clearly a step in the right direction as we understand the changing nature of COVID-19 and now with the new Omicron variant, because these are factors that are important to consider not only for individual protection, but population health. People often call that herd immunity. The importance of the protection gained either after infection or vaccination in reducing risk of future infection or breakthrough infections is critical. So as we talk about this, and I think we want to emphasize this from our public health, is that we recognize the importance of having a previous infection as well as the importance of having vaccination and boosting. And so we did some research, and I think we included a comprehensive review of the existing literature in this website. But we know that immunity wanes over time for both previously infected and vaccinated individuals. And that's why we're continue to emphasize that people who have those doses of the vaccine, particularly if you're immunocompromised, that you get a boost because it bumps up your protection, as well as if you had a previous infection, that you should also consider getting the boost of any vaccine that you choose. So in this comprehensive review of the existing literature, it talks a little bit about the difference. And I think it's important to point out that the conclusions are that the infection with the coronavirus and vaccination result in a low risk of subsequent infection with similar variants for at least 6 months. Now that's not a finite number. It's not an exact number. For some people who had a mild infection, that immune protection could be only 2 to 3 months. But for somebody who had a severe infection, that immune protection can be much longer. We're still learning about this. And also, the other conclusion was that vaccinating previously infected individuals significantly enhances their immune response and reduces risk of subsequent infection. So I think that in conclusions, and I'd be open to other questions about this, is that we continue to advocate for protection gained from the vaccines, as opposed to encouraging people to get infected, because we think that there is low risk for protection gained from the vaccine versus potentially putting yourself at risk of getting the infection for yourself and becoming one of the hospitalized with severe infection or, unfortunately, in some cases, death. So I'm going to stop there and see if there are any questions. Do we have any other slides after this one?
We have one more slide after this.
Then go ahead and cover it, then we'll open it up to question and answer, if that's okay, Dr. Turbush.
Yeah, we'll come back to natural immunity. You wouldn't think how often that question comes up. So I think we'll linger longer on that one. There's also another topic. Doris, go ahead,
I have a
please.
question. So can you clarify if hospitalizations and hospital deaths are still largely attributed to people who have not been vaccinated? Is that correct?
That is the slide right in front of you. Thank you. Go ahead, Fadi.
I know that one is for 65 and older. Because I think I understand that there are a lot of younger people, less than 65 years old, just less than 5 years of age that are in the hospital as well. So that's just kind of my general question.
Yeah, we did this data during the first week of January, where we saw similar patterns. It still remains largely among the unvaccinated. The data has sort of given us a barrier. So we'll look to update those numbers perhaps in the next meeting. But as of the first week of January, last time we were able to look at this, it remained largely among the unvaccinated.
And is that true of all age groups, Fadi? Is the question?
Right. It differs slightly between age groups, but especially for the 65 and above, the difference between unvaccinated versus fully vaccinated is starting to separate. Now we have to throw in the third factor is the booster.
Thank you.
Okay, any other prepared remarks, either Dr. Urbina or Fadi? Let's go to board member questions, because I'm sure there's quite a few. This is a real opportunity to have these experts in the room here with us. Please, questions for Dr. Urbina or Fadi? Anyone? Yes, please, Councilmember Thomas.
Hey, Dr. Fuddy, you mentioned boosters, and they're important. Are you familiar with what the European Union, the regulators of the vaccines over there are saying about boosters currently?
Yes, I believe they're discussing the discussion about a fourth booster. If I'm not connecting there, please let me know.
I kind of sent this out as a text message to some of the board members that in fact the folks that regulate the vaccines in Europe are now concerned that boosters long-term cannot be the answer because of consequences it may have for our immune system. So just checking to see if you're familiar with that.
Yes, and I believe the concern is of a regular occurring booster, a fourth, a fifth, a sixth, whatever it may be, and how that may impact the immune system, not the third booster, because they're ahead of us in disease time. Right now, the CDC and the sort of general public health in the US has not recommended going into a fourth booster. We're still in the third booster wave.
Okay, yeah. And I would just add that the World Health Organization's Technical Advisory Group on COVID-19 vaccine composition on January 11th also warned a vaccination strategy based on repeated booster doses of the original vaccine composition is unlikely to be appropriate or sustainable. So it's not really about the third shot or the one booster, but just I would like you to track that, like what's going on in other countries that are ahead of us as far as is this the long-term solution or something that's sustainable? Because it appears that perhaps,
Dina has his hands up, has some additional comment, please.
thanks.
Sure, that's a good point, and I did, both Fadi and I looked at that concern and delved deeper into that question. I think the headlines misrepresented the comment from WHO, and I think that what they're talking about, if I may, is the logistics and the political nature of having vaccines and vaccine boosters, not about safety or effectiveness. Because as I delve deeper into that question, it has to do with more of the political and logistical nature of having vaccine campaigns, which we're going to have to be looking at in the United States as well. So we follow that international literature. I think if you send us those comments and concerns, we'd be happy to look at comment. But I think it's good to always be critical of not only of the questions and issues that are happening around the world, but we'll be happy to look at them a little more carefully if you'd like.
And I think you're perhaps dead on target with the World Health Organization. However, the European Union, I think their concerns really are the effect it's going to have on the immune system, not logistics, things like that. So, but I appreciate your comments. I just have one other issue. And so I noticed, like the chart, it's the one up there right now. It does indicate one risk factor for getting admitted to the hospital is immunization status. But do we track also comorbidities? Like what percentage of those admitted have comorbidities? Which would be something like diabetes, pulmonary problems, things like that. Because if everyone that's being admitted, 100% have comorbidities, that's an important thing for us as a board and citizens to realize. It's not just your immunization status, but it's the fact that you have these comorbidities that makes you susceptible.
Absolutely, and the added attention to the impact of comorbidities on health is something that we will look back after getting over this as our community health plan right now, that's up on the website, and it was, I think, created 5 years ago, looks at active living, healthy eating. And those are all factors. We, unfortunately, on a county level data, do not have the resolution into individuals that have been hospitalized and have comorbidities. We wish we did. But based on literature, that's a huge, huge confounder. I would like to just throw a small caveat, though. In terms of comorbidities in themselves, they make up a large proportion of the U.S. population. So a comorbidity is not a rare event, unfortunately, speaking on general health. It is a significant number of the U.S. population that suffers from comorbidities. It is a factor, unfortunately, county level data does not give us that resolution.
Commissioner, if I can have a comment, I agree with you totally. You know, that obesity, diabetes, COPD, smoking, all of those comorbid factors in terms of admission to hospitals, severity of illness. I think that is true. And unfortunately, many of our population in El Paso County and in Colorado has one of those comorbidities that Fadi talked about. So it's difficult for us to tease out that, but I think you can assume that if you have other illnesses, your likelihood of being hospitalized is going to be greater. Regardless of the condition, whether or not it's a heart attack or high blood pressure, those certainly have a factor into whether or not you're hospitalized with any infectious disease, much less COVID-19.
And then my final thought on this topic is vitamin D levels. I think there have been some really good studies, and maybe Dr. Vu's tracking on this. I don't know if you measure that in your patients, Dr. Vu, but outcomes like who gets hospitalized, what happens to them once they're hospitalized, correlates, I believe, pretty closely with if they have low vitamin D levels, normal. Have you seen those studies, or do you have any comments on that?
Are you asking me or Dr. Vu?
Well, I guess you first, and then if Dr. Vu wanted to comment on it, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, there are studies out there that are looking at a number of factors, D and other lab values and vitamin deficiencies. Unfortunately, a majority of our elderly population is vitamin D deficient. And so I think if we were to test everybody for a vitamin D level, we would find a significant loss of vitamin D. So I think you're right on. We don't know the extent of that. There are probably a number of factors. So we'll continue to track that. And if there is data available, we'll provide that at a future Board of Health update.
So in our practice, or I myself do screen for vitamin D deficiency in our patients in general, in terms of vitamin D, use of vitamin D as a prevention or treatment strategy for COVID specifically. At this time, there is no recommendation from either CDC or the other source that we use is up to date to use vitamin D as a prevention or treatment of COVID-19. And I myself, my practice is that I don't recommend vitamin D as prevention or treatment of COVID-19. Not that I discourage it. I don't formally recommend it across the board. If patient would like to take vitamin D as a prevention, discourage it. I just don't recommend it across the board. And of course, it is not, again, not a CDC recommendation or NIH recommendation for vitamin D as treatment of COVID-19. Dr. Urbina, can I have your thought on those two specific vitamin D as as treatment or prevention of COVID-19?
I just thank you, Dr. Vu. I just looked at the NIH guidelines for treatment, and you're correct that vitamin D is not one of the recommendations from the NIH. But as you know, that got, as Commissioner Donaldson alluded to, there are ongoing studies looking at different treatment recommendations, and those continue to happen. But I'd be happy to send those NIH guidelines to any board members that like to receive them, because those are currently the FDA scientific approval of any treatment sources. But you're right, vitamin D is not currently recommended for specifically COVID-19.
And just to finish up my comments, just to be clear, I wasn't suggesting vitamin D is a treatment for COVID, but just as when we track things like immunization status and look, a bunch of people who get admitted haven't been immunized. If we track vitamin D levels or comorbidity, I think we would see a similar pattern. That was
maybe some research literature out there correlating those specific things. If you could get that to us as an update, perhaps, and maybe before the next board meeting, if that's possible. And Dr. Urbina and Fadi were both familiar with the text you sent and the study about multiple booster doses, and they had a chance to look at that. So that's where we are with that one.
We're happy.
Yes.
Happy, Dr. Turbush, we're happy to look at any literature concerns that you send us, and we'll provide a quick response to your concerns.
Thank you. You've always been very, very thorough and quick. Yes, please.
Thanks. And then my question is going to be if we've seen any early data on the new variant regarding efficiency and long-term for the booster or fully vaccination. So the last study that CDC put out last week, 25-week study, those that were fully immunized had very strong early positive effects. But by week 4, those that had natural immunity for the remainder of the 25-week study had better protection, as did those with natural immunity and an additional shot. So if it showed that waning for Delta, have we seen any indications that as we keep going to more and more variants that these boosters may have lesser effects? Because I think the last study did show that if you took the average from the week 1 to the last week of the study, that being immunized, natural immunity or natural immunity plus a shot was 1/2 to 1/3 better than cases, and I think half the cases for hospitalization. So again, and that was shown pretty early, the switch between cases. Do we see anything with the new variant that would indicate waning strength or efficiencies of the boosters or shots?
Not locally, we wouldn't be able to speak to that on a local data. The study that you're referencing, it was a really valuable piece of information because it showed the impact of Delta versus before Delta and the switch. Nothing so far yet on Omicron, but the two countries that we typically look closely for literature was in disease time as well as booster and vaccination time. So if we do come across Omicron specific literature, we'll be happy to share that, but nothing local.
But I do think you, Commissioner, you do make a very good point that with the changing variants, it's very important to continue to monitor that literature, monitor not only the effectiveness of vaccines and or boosters, but also monitor the effectiveness of long-term infection-related immunity. Because as the early studies have shown, not only through Alpha, Delta, and now Omicron, is that immunity wanes for all previous exposure, both to the infection or to the vaccine. So it's very important that we keep abreast of this and keep on top of it to see what the best recommendations are for our population, not only in El Paso County, but in Colorado. But still, all the other prevention strategies that we talked about before, wearing a mask indoors, avoiding crowds, washing your hands, are also equally important as vaccination status.
Looking around, a very good discussion. We have another quick update on COVID-19, on quarantine isolation. Let's see, Deanne and Haley, and Haley's here in the room too, please.
Joining us is Haley Zachary. She serves as our communicable disease program manager. In the end of December, we saw the quarantine and isolation guidance coming to us from CDC and CDPHE that has tried to put our COVID response into kind of a new phase that puts the quarantine and isolation guidance into the context of other societal critical infrastructure needs. And Haley is here this morning to give us an update on those quarantine and isolation guidance changes that guide some of the activities our team undertakes.
Thanks, Deanne. And actually, before we get started, I just wanted to mention, Dr. Vu, that a health alert network should be sent out sometime today to providers regarding outpatient use of therapeutics. So that should be going to our provider community later today. But in terms of our response, as Deanne said, on the 27th of December, CDC updated their recommendations for isolation and quarantine for the general public. We have pivoted to adopt those regulations here in Colorado and El Paso County. I will emphasize that this is not for congregate settings. So our long-term care providers, our congregate communities, such as our jails, still will go 10-day isolation period followed by the 14-day quarantine period. However, we have moved to adopt this not only for our general public, but also our school community as well. So for isolation, that period has now shortened to a period of 5 days, followed by 5 days of mask wearing. If on day 5, you are either asymptomatic or your symptoms are improving without fever and without the use of fever-reducing medications. As long as that criteria is met, then on day 6 of your isolation period, you can return back to normal activities as long as you are wearing a mask, a well-fitted mask for the further 5 days. The quarantine period has also been reduced. So again, it's moving to 5 days of quarantine from the last date of exposure and to seek testing on day 5 and then wear a mask through day 6 through 10. But you can go back to your routine activities at that point in time as well. There are still caveats to that. Interns do not need to quarantine if they have had a COVID-19 infection that has been confirmed within the previous 90 days of their exposure. If they have received a booster dose or they have completed their primary vaccine series and are not yet eligible for a booster dose. So those have all remained as exemptions from quarantine. I will say, moving back to that second bullet, if on day 5, you have not improved, you have not met that criteria to return to routine activities because you are still ill, the recommendation is to continue with your isolation until you do meet that before moving to the mask wearing and in the public. But at any point in time from day 6 through 10, if you do meet that criteria, you are eligible to return. That is for quarantine and isolation. Are there any questions regarding that piece at this point?
Board member, any questions about this slide? Okay.
Okay. So moving to the next slide, we have, as you did note, our cases have been in very high for the last month. And so we've had to pivot our response in order to accommodate that and to really prioritize the work that we're doing within our response. So some of the changes that we've had to make are really focusing our efforts on proactive messaging. So we've worked really hard with our communications team to get a banner on our website for individuals to know what they need to do should they test positive or if they are symptomatic. We've worked to get messaging out to our testing sites for the same purpose, messaging to our community partners via a press release, essentially stating the same thing. I think it's no secret that if we're looking at 39,000 cases in 1 month, that's going to be a pretty incredible feat to reach all of them. So we've had to prioritize our case investigation, and we've moved to randomization. So essentially what that means is that we pull about 1,500 cases per day. And then through those 1,500s, we sort out those that are associated with long-term care, congregate settings for they move to that team that investigates those. We also pull out those who are under the age of 18 and those who are over the age of 50. And then we pull from there 500 to 700 of those cases to call and interview. So we are working on dealing with those groups that are most severely affected or have a higher risk of an outbreak in a setting to interview for a full case investigation. We've also shifted our outbreak response to essentially move to a tiered response. So what that means is that for both our congregate care settings and our general outbreaks team, we have really shifted to prioritize those that are at a severe risk for higher infection or a higher risk for severe infection, meaning that we focus our efforts on our long-term care facility, our healthcare providers that deal with immunocompromised patients, such as dialysis centers, and other bodies that are going to deal with either immunocompromised people or those who are elderly. And then as capacity allows, we take on facilities that have a lower risk for severe disease, but are still important to our community, such as critical infrastructure, our utilities companies, our construction firms, things of that nature, that although they are at risk for an outbreak, the severity of that may be a lot lower than the patients that we're dealing with in some of those tier 1 facilities. We have also worked very closely with our school partners. We understand that as public health capacity kind of wanes, that so do our partners. And so we wanted to be thoughtful of that, understanding that it is still a requirement for schools to report individual cases of COVID-19 to the health department. So really working with them about ways that we can help to improve their capacity to really deal with the kids in front of them and the staff in front of them. And although still meeting the requirement to report to us, allowing them a little more freedom in how that is done. So those are our primary shifts. Again, these are all capacity driven. As we gain more capacity, we anticipate that we will shift to re-emphasize or reinstitute some of those previous things that we have been doing. But this is where we currently are in this surge. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Other questions for Haley?
I would just like to thank Haley and her team. We mentioned pivoting earlier in the meeting, and this is a team that prior to COVID started with about 8 individuals to address communicable disease in El Paso County through various contracts, staff, addition to staff. They now have a team of more than 50, approaching 70 team members working on the communicable disease response to serve El Paso County. And with all these surges and changes in guidance, this team constantly pivots to adapt their approach to the community. So wanted to make note of that and commend that team.
Well done. Thank you. Thanks to your team. Appreciate it. Okay, our last agenda item, let's see, public health partnership.
Yes, and in this portion, we wanted to highlight, we've talked earlier in the meeting about the partnership between public health and public safety. And that has been a cornerstone to we've undertaken. And to kick us off in this section, we have Lisa Powell, who is our Emergency Preparedness and Response Program Manager, who is here to share a bit about response activities that her team undertook in the end of the year.
Thanks.
Lisa.
Hi. You could go ahead and put the slide up. Thanks. So just as a reminder, right at the end of the year, we had the Marshall Fire up near Boulder. So in a matter of hours, the Marshall Fire destroyed more homes than any wildfire in Colorado state history. We had high winds with gusts over 100 miles an hour that pushed flames east, engulfing entire subdivisions and forcing the evacuation of approximately 35,000 individuals from the towns of Superior and Louisville. And while recovery is still ongoing, there were approximately 1,000 homes and businesses that were lost in that fire. Part of that evacuation included one hospital and a couple of assisted living facilities. And so on the 30th of December, we were monitoring the fire through emergency preparedness and through the Office of Emergency Management, and received a mutual aid request to assist with the evacuation of a long-term care assisted living facility who has a sister facility here in Colorado Springs. So there were about 80 individuals in the assisted living facility. 30 of them could be relocated to a facility in Greeley, but the remaining 50 needed to be evacuated here to El Paso County. The facility that is located on the north side of town here in El Paso County had space available, but it's the kind of an assisted living facility where you sort of rent apartments from them if you're going to move there, so it doesn't have any furniture in it. So the request came to us in El Paso County Public Health, could we use some of our supplies from our alternative care facilities to assist with setting up spaces for these individuals who were coming to Colorado Springs. So we quickly coordinated with the Office of Emergency Management, the hazmat team actually, and our South Central Healthcare Coalition to take supplies to this facility and help them get set up with the cots that we have in our current cache, as well as some personal protective equipment for the staff that was coming, and then some bedding to go with that. And then they were very grateful and thankful that we were able to quickly assist them with this. And they then on the 6th of January were able to go back to their facility. And we then re-grabbed all of our items back from them. Additionally, our immunizations program did coordinate with the state to transfer some of our vaccines for children Tdap inventory to Boulder for their tetanus vaccines, which is a normal operation that occurs in the recovery phase as people are going back into the burned areas. So, thank you.
Questions for Lisa Powell? Colorado Springs Fire Department. Yes, do you want to introduce this? This is great. Thank
Yes,
you.
so along
Partnership.
with that theme of working with our partners for public safety and public health, we have Jordan Linder, who is our grants coordinator here this morning, along with Steve Johnson from the Springs Fire Department, to discuss that partnership and what it will bring to the community. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Jordan Linder, been here about a year as the grants coordinator. With me is Steve Johnson, as he's been part of the fire department in the community and public health administrator role for the past 4 years. And through, you can go to the next slide, through our CDC funding for COVID response, our work plan addressed the need to quickly respond to those populations within El Paso County who are underrepresented, so the homeless, incarcerated, and aging. And so we found that really quick partnership with the CARES team who is already conducting that work. And so we've funneled some of the CDC funding that we received to the CARES work. And so Steve's going to elaborate on the work that they're already doing and about to start this new year.
Thank you, Jordan. So this could take forever, but I'm going to make it really quick because I was told we have about 5 minutes. But we're doing a lot of great things, and I'm so thankful and grateful for these grant dollars to help us. I want to start just saying overall, we began in 2012 as a division saying, how do we help people who call for services, but they need something else, right? They need primary care, they need mental health, they need supportive services. And that was the beginning of our CARES program, our initial one. But from that now, we've taken that skill set we learned, and it's become something we've applied through different streams of need, if you will. So CARES really for me now is a navigational model that we use when we're doing navigation in populations such as homeless, folks that are struggling with how to use 911 and emergency department appropriately, folks having trouble aging in place, and now moving into this new jail navigation program. We also have another set of mobile response unit things that have a different umbrella for us. So community public health is our division, and then we have these programs. So these dollars specifically that we're working together with, this whole idea of working with folks coming out of the CJC started a couple of years ago with Dr. Johnson, next door, and a handful of us. And then COVID's really kind of changed that. But this gives us the chance to step into people's lives when they're coming out of CJC now. And our focus is going to be individuals with substance abuse disorder, severe mental illness, and homelessness for this particular population. We have 2 teams of 2 that we're bringing online, brand new program. And what will happen is the jail team will make a referral for the appropriate individuals. We will then, when possible, do a video visit before they're even discharged. And then a pair of individuals on a team, a crisis navigator with lived experience, or a recovery navigator, I should say, and a master's level clinician will work with them, kind of holding their hand, if you will, to build up what they need. So they'll have somebody who, as soon as they step out of that jail, can walk beside them to make sure they get good, safe housing as they move towards long-term housing, to make sure that they get the mental health support they need, the physical health support they need, the medications, and then eventually a job, and able to really reintegrate into our community in a way that helps them be successful in pursuing the goals and dreams they have, but have been prevented by other underlying things such as, mental, physical health, social determinants, and things of that nature. So we're really excited about how this is going to move forward. And these dollars that we're working together with will do a lot with that. So any excess dollars that might be involved there are going to go to support these other programs we've discussed, homeless outreach. So right now in the homeless outreach area, we're doing testing on the trails, in the communities, in the isolation shelter. We're doing shots on the trail for those who want them. So twice a week with money from county, shots from county. We come over and pick them up, and we go out and we see who's willing and able to do shots. And so also working with individuals who are struggling in the moment, and then also working with homeless individuals who need and are willing to access care, and doing VI SPDATs, getting documentation, getting them housed, and getting them moved into services to really scaffold and support them. And that's all of our navigation work, including the other programs where everyone's coming in on different streams, but we're focusing on that idea of how do every individual gets their own care plan when we're doing incentives navigation, and then how do we scaffold them up? So everybody is unique for us. It's very high touch. It's not a phone call. It is, we go out to the trails, we go to the house, we knock on the doors, we provide transportation when that's necessary to get them to an appointment, and all those types of things. So very high touch program, but this is a whole new area that I think is one we need desperately. As I interviewed some folks in recovery, many of them said, when I was coming out of the jail, I was in a good spot. And I said, it's going to be different this time. But they step out, there's no one there. There's no help, and the next thing you know, they're right down in Las Vegas doing what they were doing before, and right back into the system they go. So this helps us interrupt the cycle. all these different programs do, but this is going to be really great partnership on this one. So, questions?
Yes.
Great work. Thank you. And I'm assuming and hoping that there's a good bit of data collection. While it is very individual and high touch,
Correct.
so the quantity won't be there. I'm hoping there are some other ways we can evaluate the effectiveness long-term and use that.
Yeah, there
Going
will be a
forward.
lot of data collection. So we're doing this funding from your, from your CJ, our CDC dollars, but also we're doing this in conjunction with SB 202 dollars. And we're doing a lot of data collection around. Everything we do has a lot of data collection around it. We use a system that's been talked to some degree called Gelada. And we do a lot of intensive case management. So there's a lot of data that we get.
Excellent. Look forward to seeing it. Hopefully it'll affect the recidivism rate. Good deal too.
I believe it will, but the data will show us.
Councilmember Donaldson.
So one of my questions, Commissioner Burr just asked it, and the other one is, it's more of a general question. Is there a better place to house this program than the fire department? It seems like something that would naturally come under public health or a different place. It's just thinking, the fire department seems to be getting more and more into medical game. Any thoughts?
Sure. So it's a good question. And a lot of people say, how do you get involved in this? So our division is separate, if you will, and our focus is, started around that 911 supervisor population. But everybody that you look at with these needs, substance abuse, mental health, physical health, at some point they're going to touch the emergency response system, either through a police interaction, ambulance interaction, fire department interaction. Fire department gets called over 70,000 calls a year, and the majority of them are not fire calls. They are not structure fires. And so these individuals are touching our system, and there's multiple things. First of all, it gives us a chance, especially programs like this, get in early and get above the stream. So before they show up in the emergency department, before they show up at the jail, we can get in and start doing that around some needs that they have that are physical and mental health in nature. And nobody is really filling that void, so we've stepped into it. But it impacts not only that person to help redirect their life into a healthier one, it helps our 911 system and emergency response system, because now we're freeing up fire trucks, now we're freeing up emergency response, ambulance, police officers. Already we struggle with call determinant times right across our community. And so this allows them to be more effectively used or trained for and designed for, bringing the right type of service to individuals who need it. They don't need the fire truck. They need someone like us to come in and intervene when it's a lower acuity thing, help them redirect their lives. And then it brings a greater quality of life overall to our community and saves money, right? Because now we're getting people into the care stream they need, and that becomes more efficient and effective. So for us, we're really kind of stepping in. And if we look at all of our programs, we're now in our division getting involved almost in a continuum, if you will, of low acuity medical response without police, which is getting ready to start. Our CRT program has been around on, mental health response. And then we've got setting up now a pilot from us around low acuity medical response. We add in this navigation piece for people that don't know how. And now you start to address this whole level in our society and ends up calling 911 an emergency response, but that's not the right one. And so this helps bring them out of that, get them in the right stream, and then allows our emergency response to function far more effectively for our community. And people get the right care. And our community ends up benefiting economically because people get back into the work program. They start the resource drain, if you will, goes down, and we have a better, atmosphere in our community, if you will, too, as people get help and they're not on street corners, they're not having mental breakdowns and those types of things. So I think overall it's a really good, it's every area.
Maybe we can get together.
Love it. Yeah.
Any other comments or questions? No? I particularly appreciate you being here. Fundamentally, it's county-city cooperation, but more important, importantly to me personally, it's this public health, public safety partnership. We kind of started part of it with the home visits with the fire department, right? Ops call.
Yes.
And that was a great example. That worked well. I'm glad to see that this is building and the PPROEM, Pikes Peak Regional Office of Emergency Management, is another great city county example. So I kind of teed this up once before, but I think that will be a topic that will be presented at our February board meeting. And thanks so much for what you do. That's a great program.
Thanks for having me. Love working together. I hope we do more and more and keep creating more together. So
We do too.
all right.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. I think we have here from EPSO, right?
Yes, and joining us, Marini Klaber, who serves as our regional epidemiologist and has been our liaison with EPSO and the Criminal Justice Center. And she is also here with Chief Jeff Kramer to discuss some of the collaboration on the response to COVID in the EPSO and Criminal Justice Center.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. I just want to say thank you for the opportunity. I was tapped early on in the pandemic to be a subject matter expert liaison to both the Sheriff's Office as well as the Criminal Justice Center. And that has been a privilege for me to work alongside of these dedicated individuals. It's amazing what they do on any given day. So hats off to them. So with that, I will just say it is a pleasure to introduce Bureau Chief Jeff Kramer.
Thanks, Marini. I appreciate the introduction and thanks to the larger group. I appreciate the invitation and opportunity. I really consider it a privilege to join the group today and be able to spend a few minutes just talking about and highlighting the collaboration, the teamwork, the partnership that still exists and is ongoing because we're not out of this thing yet. Just talking about the work that's been done, continues to be done through the course of navigating the pandemic for the Sheriff's Office, and then more specifically at the El Paso County Jail. So as I get started, probably no different than anyone else, when this got going, the Sheriff's Office certainly struggled early on to understand, all the risks and potential impacts of what COVID was going to bring. There were certainly early on more questions than answers for sure. And as a member of command staff, was prompting a lot of meetings early on, roundtable discussions at the command and executive levels to start to try to figure out what the impacts may be and what our responses needed to be to that. There was a lot of urgency behind that because we were trying to pivot quickly, but when you have more questions and answers, it's hard to know what that pivot may need to look like. And of course, the sheriff was immediately engaging other department heads and key subject matter experts to try to help us answer those questions. And of course, that was our partners at El Paso County Public Health. And I was so impressed, as was the sheriff, et cetera, for their immediate engagement and oftentimes just a response to a last minute meeting being called and trying to help us fill in those questions and provide some clarity in what all of us, I'm sure, were dealing with a lot of fog at that point for sure. Next slide, please. So as we were trying as an office to just collectively understand what we needed to be doing, the sheriff has many mandates by state statute on what missions the office needs to carry out. And so we're having to look at COVID and its impacts from a lot of different angles, thinking about the impacts to patrol and service delivery within that area, our civil process and the management of not only evictions and the things that would follow with that, to mandates for wildland fire, et cetera, but of course the jail. And of course the jail became in and of itself a very unique and probably the largest and most ongoing concern for the office because it is the single largest jail in the state. We have the largest sheriff's office in the state as well. And the bed capacity for the jail is 1,837. Now that's a little bit misleading in this sense. We have 1,837 for bed capacity, but we could not actually house that many safely because there's normal segregation concerns, things of that nature to try to keep certain inmates away from one another. So you couldn't really fill up that bed space, at least safely. Pre-COVID, our inmate population was near 1,500, a little bit less than that. And of course, we have in this facility, we have over 400 employees that come and go to work at the El Paso County Jail, between our sworn staff and also our professional staff as well. And then pre-COVID, to give an idea of kind of the revolving door of inmates coming in and out of this facility, pre-COVID, we were doing about 22,000 bookings per year and about 23,000 releases per year, roughly. Those were round figures that I'm sharing with the group. So a very transient group, if you will, amongst the inmate population within the facility as well. Most of our population are pretrial detainees, not sentenced inmates, although we have certainly a percentage of them as well. And so the flow, as I was just talking about, the flow of staff and inmates in and out, often a short duration, posed very unique and continue to pose unique challenges for us, very different than probably a lot of other settings in the county. So we were very fortunate and have been fortunate to have the Department of Public Health, El Paso County Public Health, assign Marini her team as a liaison direct to our office to be able to streamline support as just ongoing disease mitigation activities for us. And that has been, well, really can't be overstated, the importance and the significance that role and that particular partnership has played. Early on in the pandemic, of course, our county coroner, Dr. Kelly, at the time acting in the capacity as the deputy medical director, provided guidance early on in 2020 on how to reduce the chances of introduction of COVID into the jail. We also had a team from public health, along with Dr. Kelly and Dr. Johnson at the time, as well as the Marini and her team, toured the jail in the fall of 2020 to really understand what we were dealing with. This is really key and continues to be key, the fact that they came down, took the time to understand the lay of the land, if you will, because it's very easy to have a conversation about what, let's say, health experts would be recommending an operation do to help mitigate the risks of COVID. But then at times we're having to push back and say, hey, operationally, we can't do that, for these other reasons, whether it's a safety and security risk or whatever that might be. And so the tour became invaluable to be able to kind of have the health professionals, if you will, understand some other challenges that we deal with day in and day out, and then how do those blend together and reach a common ground where the risk associated with COVID could be mitigated at the highest level possible, while we then also maintain the level of safety and security in the jail that we need to. And so that was really, really key. Whoever's working the slides is doing a great job. You're staying right with me. Public health and just reaching out, they requested that Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment had a rapid response team to the National Guard provide mass testing of the entire inmate population as soon as an outbreak was identified. I'm sure most in that room and on the call remember when, as our numbers started to creep up, and the sheriff made a very conscientious decision, and through the advice of our health department, our health partners as well, to go ahead and do mass testing of the inmate population. That's risky, to some nature, right? From an optics perspective, political perspective, whatever. But of course, that revealed big numbers inside the facility, where really a majority of the inmate population ended up having positive results, testing results through that. But we couldn't have done that without the partnerships with public health and that rapid response team from the National Guard. From that, there was weekly ongoing testing, getting us through that surge of a high number of positives. And then also that's continued. Now that's on a voluntary basis now for the inmate population, but that partnership continues. The availability of those weekly tests for the inmate population continues. And then also public health has been instrumental in assisting our contracted medical provider in the jail, which is WellPath, on a process and kind of keeping the supply chain going for the rapid tests that are used for inmates as well, for our volunteer inmate population and those that are, when I say volunteers, those are working in the kitchen and the laundry and things like that that are tested daily. And of course, as you can imagine, constant and consistent guidance, and this is a changing time
guidance on appropriate quarantine and isolation of inmates as well as staff. Next slide, please. The team that was formed after the outbreak was identified to provide guidance and assist with a lot of different things. Some of those key things were to be able to set up vaccination provided by local provider early on for those eligible and high-risk inmates. Some comments I heard earlier in this very meeting talking about comorbidity factors and other things. We certainly, this jail population, the inmate population, to a large extent is representative of some of those very other risk factors that were earlier in this meeting. And so identifying those high-risk inmates and what that would look like in terms of setting up vaccination and what those provisions would be. Mass vaccination clinics offered to inmates as soon as vaccine was available for the correctional population based on the guidelines that were coming out. And also, again, as I mentioned, setting up the ongoing weekly vaccination clinics for inmates. And again, that is still in place today. Next slide. A lot of coordination made with our health partners with employee risk management and our office to provide testing of our staff at the jail. This was done starting around that time of the outbreak. And again, this is something that continues today, where all of the staff assigned to our detention bureau that includes our jail operations, our staff is provided weekly or does weekly PCR testing that's done right here on campus. And then one really efficiency that was gained there was the fact that coordination was done where those testing samples are sent right to the state public health order, or I'm sorry, right to the lab here locally for those results to be turned around a little bit more efficiently, a little bit more quickly, et cetera. And then, as I mentioned earlier, just that ongoing support for our jail operations as it relates to quarantine, isolation, and also a lot of key discussions over this past year, and we continue to have them at times, for how we even address operational things within the larger operation. Kitchen and laundry, one of those, where you have these very key infrastructure things that support our jail and our inmates. We have to feed, right now our inmate population is sitting at 1,327 today. We have to feed 1,327 inmates 3 times a day. And the risk to the population as it relates to COVID and how do we mitigate risk right within the food operation has been key throughout this. And we've had outbreaks, outbreaks within outbreaks amongst kitchen staff, and public health has been huge on providing guidance within that operation as well. Next slide. Obviously, some real common things that have been ongoing. Public health's been huge in helping us implement prevention measures surrounding face coverings and isolation and quarantine wards, testing and vaccination, and also educational materials. I'll put an exclamation point on this regarding quarantine wards. We have certain triggers, as you can imagine, that will cause us to put a ward under quarantine status. And even as recent as a month ago, we had one ward, our isolation ward, for incoming positives when we test every single new booking that's coming in. And we have an isolation ward for those new positives that come in upon their booking. But we had 0 wards that were, in addition to that were under quarantine because our numbers were good and we didn't need a quarantine ward. But even as recent as a month ago, we started popping some positives on our volunteer inmates in the kitchen, the laundry, et cetera. And within about a 5-day span, we went from 0 wards in quarantine to 9 wards in quarantine. And the conversations that occurred during that time with our partners from public health, quick meetings, hey, can we talk this afternoon at 3 o'clock, and a group of 5 or 6 experts jump on a phone call and help us navigate some of those things and what we're doing are one example of the things that have gone over the course of the last year and a half or so as we navigate a very fluid environment there. You see the specific measures included there that we've done and have been talked about already, working on different key things of lowering the inmate population without sacrificing public safety, the deployment of that rapid response team for testing as commented, and then of course meetings and phone calls with public health epidemiologists to monitor ongoing case rates, et cetera. Next slide. Yeah, in closing, I really felt this was important. All of us have certainly experienced this with the introduction of COVID into the world and then into our community here.
We see that in times of crisis, leadership and subject matter experts are leaned on heavily. And I just wanted to make sure that on behalf of the Sheriff's Office, I can't say enough about the responsiveness, whether day or night, no matter what, text messages, phone calls, meetings, the responsiveness of El Paso County Public Health and its staff to engage, roll up their sleeves and help us navigate as an office. Then, of course, down to the jail operation for sure, navigate tough issues in a very, very dynamic and fluid environment. So my hat's off to that team, and I appreciate the collaboration throughout the year and ongoing very much. That's all I have.
Thank you so much. Any questions for Marini or for Chief Kramer regarding our support of the EPSO CJC response and the collaboration?
Great.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Chief Kramer. We appreciate you joining us today and providing that overview and report out for our board.
Welcome very much.
Seems to be a theme here, public health, public safety. It's time for public comment. And we have, I believe, who are here to if you have to, have to leave. Okay.
Any on Teams?
Do we have any?
Do we have any public?
None on
comments?
Teams.
None on
No.
Teams.
Here we, okay, we ready?
He's working on it.
Are they located somewhere that they're watching?
Yes, yeah, and that's worth chewing on here a little bit. When we've had large numbers in the past, there are two rooms that we can use to have members of the public sit and watch the live stream. I think, though, that what we can do in the future, and if we don't have such large numbers, is to invite them to just sit here in the room with us and hear the whole presentation. And then between now and the next meeting, we're going to chew on the idea of right up front, have members of the public speak up front, and we'll look at the pros and cons of that. But they had to walk up from the assessor's classroom is where please, yes, come on in. Everybody can come in.
Okay, do you want to?
Sit down. We don't have to do it in any particular order. Please, everybody come in. Yep.
I'm going to put the list right
We'll do this introduction thing once. Hi,
Right over here. You're supposed to.
welcome right here. You're right center stage,
Podium.
right up here. Here you go.
Right here.
Yeah.
No, right here.
There you go. Welcome to the Board of Health. Please let us know who you are. And if you're an El Paso County resident, that's important to me. And if you're with any organization, any particular organization,
Okay.
and go right ahead, please.
Okay, my name's Christy Davis. I live in El Paso County. I'm a mother. Good morning. I'm here today to address two concerns I have. The first is about a member of the Board of Health who made a statement that I feel is counterproductive and against what the actual data collected by EPCPH is showing COVID-19. The chart on EPCPH website shows a significant drop of 20% in COVID incidences over the past 7 days. Average positivity has dropped 10% in the same time frame, and hospitalization rates are the lowest they have been all month. And yet a member of the Paso County Board of Health was quoted in an article released on Monday to KKTV 11 saying that over the last week, they have seen their COVID cases plateau. They went on to say the concern is the next variant is both transmissible and highly virulent. It will cause severe disease that will put us in a problematic situation. This statement has no evidence or data to back it up and is inciting unnecessary fear into the constituents of this county. We do not need members of the Board of Health making public comments that are predictions. You should be focusing on the data at hand and making decisions based on the factual data being obtained by the Board of Health. I implore you to state the facts when speaking to the press in the future. The second item I would like to bring to your attention was an event that occurred in Littleton, Colorado this past Friday. The Tri-County Health Department held a COVID vaccination clinic inside a public school in Littleton. Parents voiced their concerns, making sure a parent or legal guardian was required to be present to sign consent, and were assured by the principal that any student under the age of 18 cannot get a vaccination without parent permission and must have a parent or legal guardian present to sign the consent. However, 2 boys aged 15 and 16 entered the clinic at their school, seen with fake names, fake birth dates, and forged fake consent forms. One claimed he was 20 but was only 16. No ID required, and stumbled when asked his birth date. He was offered his choice of vaccination, while only the Pfizer is approved for children under 18. The second child also did not show identification, nor was he asked if a parent was present. No parent was present. He was also approved for the vaccine. Both did not have IDs and both used fake names. It was that easy. Neither of the children accepted the vaccination offered and left. The entire event was body cams that the 2 boys were wearing, which I will share with you in an email following this meeting. On November 14th, 2021, the CDPHE issued a third amended Public Health Order 21-01, and in Section 1B states, the order requires the state to administer the vaccine to any individual. They will not be required to show a valid government-issued ID, Social Security card, a fee, or proof of insurance. This is one instance that was obviously a problem, and I'm sure you can think of other scenarios where people may pose as others to get the vaccine, gaining false proof that they are vaccinated when someone else could potentially receive the injection for them. They are going on our system. And when we are talking about minors, this is a very dangerous scenario. Please review the practices provided by El Paso County Health. There needs to be alternative measures put in place to prevent this from happening in our county. Concerns seriously. Thank you. And my printer ran out of paper, but I was going to make copies for all of you, but this is the order that was put out on November 14th.
You know what, we can pass it around and maybe even make additional copies. Thank you very
I
much.
highlighted the portion where.
Okay, good comments.
Clarification is.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Can we have copies made?
We will. Yes, let's do
We
it.
should do that.
Okay, we're gonna make it happen right now. Okay. Yes, please. Hi. Hi, good morning, and welcome to the El Paso County Board of Health. Please let us know who you are, if you're a resident of El Paso County, and if you belong to any group that you're representing here today.
Thank you. My name's Andrea Roberson. I live in El Paso County, and I represent health and wellness for humanity. And the introduction of COVID has been pushed with a lot of fear, used for diagnosing, and it's been not been studied by the Cochrane studies, which, as you know, as a physician, the Cochrane studies are the gold standard for physicians to refer to for good testing and procedures. And those Cochrane studies have not done an evaluation on the PCR test and whether it's accurate in identifying our big, let's see. So there's also aborted fetal cell tissue used in the testing and production of each COVID shot and the monoclonal antibody treatment. This is a problem for people that take communion in hopes and belief that we receive peace through consuming the authority attached to the blood of our Savior, the Passover lamb that gave his life for the sins of the world, not injecting into our body not partaking and putting in our body the authority of the blood of a sacrificed child. HEK 293 is aborted fetal cell tissue. HEK stands for human embryonic kidney, and you can learn more about that. Revelations 18:23 says, your merchants, the great businessmen, the great men of the earth, will deceive all the nations with, and he uses a funny English word we don't really understand or have anything to do with, but if you look at the Greek, it says, they will deceive all the nations with pharmakia. The CDC, the NIH, the NIH, the FDA, and the regulating committees in our nation that we've trusted for many years and decades have become compromised with a conflict of interest, and their hands and their money they're receiving. For you can see it in the public record of the US Patent Office, over 4,000 patents that have been done on SARS COVID-19 to gain function. And so when in 2020, I think Ralph Barrick maybe or someone wrote a paper about the novel coronavirus, those 73 new aspects we hadn't seen coming, they hit us from out of nowhere. There were over 73 patents on each one of those new things, those new novel aspects. So I beg of you to look at science beyond just the mainstream media, because science can only be strong and true and right if we challenge one another in our labs. And the true science will stand true. We don't silence people that disagree with. We listen and we gain, for there's wisdom in a multitude of counsel. The definition of vaccines is different. Protocols are killing people. Remdesivir did not complete its second phase or its third phase trial. In medical trials, it was taken off on the 5th day because it was shutting down people's kidneys.
Let's go ahead and just bring it to a close, please.
So look into that. Some of the things being promoted are killing people, and they're being treated for COVID. So they have COVID and they die from COVID. They say they died from COVID, but maybe it was the remdesivir that shut their kidneys down first. Consider this. Look at other sides, please. I beg of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
One other thing, real quick. The whole life insurance companies that are giving us, if my dad dies, I get a big life insurance policy. They're looking at the death rate, and in 2020, the death rate the margin wasn't much different, 1 or 2%. But in 2021, the year of the vaccine, the death rate went up by 40% in all categories. And so they didn't say it's from the vaccine. It might have been heart attack, stroke. It might have been a myriad of different things. But in 200 years, it's unthinkable. It never has happened that the death rates went up 40%, and that's from the actuaries at life insurance companies.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your comments. Thanks for coming in today. Okay. Next. Pardon?
Do we need to wipe this up?
If you want, that's fine. It's okay. Hi, welcome. Please let us know who you are and if you're an El Paso County resident and if you represent any particular group today.
My name is Holly Benson. I live in, excuse me. My name is Holly Benson.
Holly?
I live in El Paso County.
Great.
And I don't represent any particular group. I represent the multitudes of men and women and children, especially children. That's why I'm here today, because of you people and your very important voice in the world of families. And I know you all have families. I know you probably all have children, perhaps grandchildren. I'm a mother and a grandmother myself, and I'm here because we are very concerned for the children and the effect of implementing vaccine directives across the board. And also the effect on families who choose not to vaccinate their children and may be not treated equally because of their choices. And we live in the United States, we live in America, we live in the land of freedom. And I see our freedoms being ignored by people, and for the sake of the overall good, but we don't have proof yet of that. We don't have proof that the vaccine is good. We don't have proof that the tests are even good. And I'm, as a parent and grandmother, I just beseech you and I beg you to take a look outside of your world here, which is very big and very governmental, but there are opportunities out online for you to learn about a possibility. And I recommend to you to watch a program called Pandemic 1 and then Pandemic 2. It is, it's very good information. It's presented truthfully. It's everything can be documented. We're here for the truth. And when things are being pushed on people, you have to question that, because we don't live in a country where we don't live in Russia. We don't, we're not a communist country, and we value freedom so very much, never more so than now, perhaps. But I really didn't have much. I didn't know I was going to be speaking.
No, that was great.
But
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming in today.
Thank you very much. I beg you to watch Pandemic 1 and Pandemic 2.
Okay. Thanks. Thanks for your time. Thanks for coming in. One more. Hello, sir.
Hello, y'all.
Hey, welcome.
Thank you.
Please let us know again who you are, and if you're an El Paso County resident, I think you are, and if you belong with any particular group today.
Thank you. I am Kent Roberson, Dr. Kent Roberson. I'm a family physician, been in the community, El Paso County since '97 as a clinician and a scientist. Hopefully, as I speak a number of times, you'll know my credentials, but I'll bore you once again. I'm not sure, up until today, I thank you very much for the email. I've sent a number of emails, not sure anyone gets them. So I'm really looking forward and appreciate the changes you're doing there. My background, I'm a board certified family physician, been in clinical practice since forever. And I'm also a scientist. I've done more than 40 as principal investigator on pharmaceutical research. So I understand that environment as well. I have a master's degree in experimental design. So I very much understand, arrogantly I will say, understand science and research. What I want to talk about today is trust. I'm riffing off of something President Terbush wrote in December, a piece entitled "We're Learning the Wrong Lessons from COVID-19." And I think, whereas there's a lot I disagree with in that, where there was a paragraph talking about trust. And I think, and again, I very much appreciate what you're doing. I don't want to be critical specifically, but I think it was a straw horse argument of being, the trust is lost in this group, which I agree with. The community does not trust the El Paso County Department of Health right now. But not because of anti-scientific. I would, which was President Terbush's one comment, but he also truthfully said new information becomes available in science which disputes previous. Einstein also said science can only flourish in an atmosphere of free speech. So where does that leave me? Let me trim it down to three things where this board can regain trust. They've taken one step. One step is being sure when I send an email, I know you get it. Previous to this, and we'll see going forward how it goes. I think it goes into the ether. Some paid staff member gets it and it never goes to the board who I sent it to. That's my impression. That's when I talk to the community. That's their impression. Second, you had an opportunity in November, December to really listen to the public community. You had a resolution that you thought was important. Members showed up and said, I don't like this. Even if they didn't fully understand it, then a group of us got together and sent another resolution. To give you my perspective, your resolution had what, 5, 6 references, none of them primary source. The resolution that we sent as a group of concerned citizens had 50, most primary source research. This, as a scientist, I'm concerned. You're relying on expert opinion, not on the primary research. We're in a climate of authoritarian abuse from the top down, federal, state, local, everywhere, and we citizens are concerned about that. We're in an environment where the scientific method has been co-opted. Evidence-based medicine has been co-opted by corporate and political entities, and I'm going to send you all an article for you to consider from the Journal of American Physicians and Surgeons. COVID-19 response demonstrates the tyranny of evidence-based medicine. I'm not saying this is definitive. I'm saying I want you to think about this, please. Board of Health's resolution passed in December was pushed through, and to the community, it felt like our input didn't matter. You had an agenda and you were gonna do it. And so trust was lost. The third is, and I very much appreciate that you listen. I was at that meeting in November when you had, 2 hours of comments. I don't know, it seemed like forever public comments. I very much appreciate that. The optics are bad when public comments are at the end of the meeting. All the decisions are made, public comments are after the meeting. And we get 5 to 7 days to look at an agenda. And that agenda didn't have the details. If you remember the November meeting, there was still problems with the resolution. And thankfully, Dr. Donaldson said, let's listen to public comment, and you're able to hear those. So those are just in brief 3 points of trust that I think is why there's lack of trust. Not because there's an anti-scientific, not on my part, not on the people I talk to. There is a sense that there is a agenda that's corporate and governmental and that you are stuck with. And that's what comes across to the public. So my admonition and my prayer for you is Psalm 118:19. No, 119:18, sorry. Jehovah, open our eyes to see the wonderful truth in your instruction. Pray that for you and myself every day. So I want you to hear truth and cleared out from all the smog we're in right now. So that's my admonition. And now that I'm encouraged, I'll send you this email. Thank you for your
Thank you very much. Thank you for your comment. Okay, I think we're there. Okay. Any other member comments? Ian? Okay, I think this has been a jam-packed show. Yes.
I just, maybe 2 things. Looks like maybe line. If I really appreciate your thoughts of, hey, let's have the citizens that come in the room with us during the meeting. I hope we can do that in the future. If our rooms here are too small, I would suggest that we look into using Centennial Hall for our meeting so that citizens can be there, watch what we do, and they're not like brought in one at a time, for their comments and then pulled back out of the room. I just think that would be appreciated by the citizens. and it would be no harm for us, right? So it's a thought, maybe we can put that on the agenda. In the
Look
future.
at other options in this building.
Okay.
So we've already looked at bigger rooms in here and we're working some logistics that way in case we need more space.
Okay. And it's just because it's difficult to do any of this by email because we can't communicate as a group. That's why I'm bringing it up now. Do we think that's likely for next month that citizens will be allowed in the room?
Can't predict. It kind of depends on numbers.
Okay, so then my suggestion, maybe we can put this on the agenda to discuss this next month, would be to have a room big enough to accommodate at least say 20 people or 10, so we can do it in the future.
It'll be on the agenda.
Okay, I appreciate that. And then we talked about moving the citizen comment to the front, and so that'll be on the agenda. I appreciate that. The final thing we might consider is right now, citizens go to our website. There's no link to watch a Board of Health meeting, say the previous ones. Is that not correct?
No.
There,
There is.
It's a county IT issue.
AgendaNet, because it's a third-party system, but we can probably have our clerk to the board that keeps the official, like the BOCC board, and keeps all the official things that county commissioners are involved in one place through AgendaNet. We can probably have them work with the public health page, but it's independently run.
Okay,
Does that
so-
make sense?
So the recommendation, and this could go on the agenda if we want to do it that way, would be to have, when someone goes to our Board of Health page, where they see our,
Archive
agenda.
meetings.
They can just know they can click on, watch last week's meeting or what, something like that, like city council's done that way. Right now, I think it's through Facebook. I think this is
Yeah.
correct,
The
so.
meetings are streamed on Facebook and
And
available.
some people now, if they don't have a Facebook account, can they still watch it on Facebook?
Yes, if you go to Facebook, you do not have to have your own login to be able to see public
So
content.
if we could just have that link for citizens there so that they can easily find out how to watch previous meetings, I think that would be helpful. And I appreciate your time, for letting me add that stuff in here at the end.
We'd be happy to work on improvements to that page.
Thank you.
For sure. Okay, any other comments? Anything else? Good job, team. Meeting adjourned.